to order. Welcome to the School District of Waukesha's Board of Education Teaching and Learning Committee meeting for Tuesday, February 1st, 2022. We begin under general business this evening. Stacey, has the meeting been properly posted?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Next, under general business, we have a Bright Lights presentation this evening. Prairie Elementary School will be highlighting their efforts tonight with the partnerships in comprehensive literacy. So we want to welcome those that are here from Prairie, as well as Carly Solberg, the principal. She here? Yep. There she is. Yep. And we look forward to your presentation tonight. Thank you very much for being here.
Is this one? Yep, good. Thank you. So I'm Carly Solberg. I'm the principal from Prairie Elementary School, and I've got a whole crew here with me tonight. This is Beth Ann, and she is one of our education assistants. This is Shannon, and she is our literacy coach who's in our building 100% of the time. This is Emily Hansen, and she is one of our kindergarten model classroom teachers. And Melissa is on the end down there, and she is one of our second grade model classroom teachers. We know that you all have heard a bit about the PCL model, and so tonight we're going to highlight how those features are playing out in our plan, specifically at Prairie. We'll hear from the teachers and our coach and assistant here, and then we'll go into some of the data that we've seen increase as a result of implementing this model. So our goal this year is all around increasing teacher expertise in small group instruction. And we are focused on teacher expertise because we know it matters. It's one of the most important factors in implementing student achievement. And so I've got a few quotes up there. I'll give you just a minute to read those that talk about the importance of teacher expertise. So as we go through this presentation today, that'll be a common theme, is our work around developing teacher knowledge.
Having the opportunity to grow professionally and work closely with Shannon this year as a model classroom teacher has significantly impacted both my teaching and student achievement. Throughout our coaching cycles, we collaborated and studied latest research in literacy instruction. We have closely studied the reading behaviors for a complex group of students that we both work with. And through observational feedback from Shannon, constant reflection, and strategic planning, it has resulted in tremendous reading growth that I'm going to share with you. One student has made almost 2 years of reading growth. He started reading at a level 1 this year, so I teach second grade, and that's a beginning of kindergarten reading level. And he's currently reading at a level 15, which is close to the end of a first grade reading level. And another coaching cycle focused on aligning instruction with the special education teacher that I work with. 2 students with IEPs have made nearly a year's growth, starting at a level 0, being a non-reader, and are now reading close to the end of a kindergarten reading level at a level 4. Currently, I've had the opportunity to be part of a team with other model classroom teachers in our building who are passionate about teaching literacy and committed to taking on new literacy knowledge and pedagogy. We've had ongoing collaboration meetings by further analyzing reading records and intentionally driving our instruction for our guided reading groups that we meet with.
I have had the opportunity to reflect on and collaborate around what the beginnings of literacy look like in kindergarten and build a purposeful literacy foundation in my classroom from a workshop model to guided reading and onward. Being a model classroom allows me to really recognize my strengths and capitalize on them while also focusing on my areas of growth within my own practice. Shannon and I connect frequently around these young learners and their various levels of what they can control in early reading and writing. We take research-based approaches together, and I feel well supported to implement my new learning. Through this, I have seen our students make significant progress.
Our model classroom teachers have a multiplier effect with the rest of our staff, both informally in the way they think and talk about data and readers in our professional learning communities, but also more formally as they take on leadership roles in our upcoming professional development. An example of this is our current upcoming professional development plan in February and March, where a few of our model classroom teachers are in a group coaching cycle where we are digging into an instructional strategy and studying together. The model classroom teachers are then implementing and engaging in that strategy on their own, and then moving to lead professional development with the rest of our teachers on that instructional strategy in our professional development time together. The other teachers in our building are then going to be able to choose to either observe the model classroom teacher in that strategy, co-plan with me, or have me observe and give them feedback, whatever they feel is best as they implement the new instructional strategy. Having our model classrooms as learning labs supports all of our staff as they implement literacy changes in their classroom.
I have the opportunity to partake in professional development once a month with Carly and with Shannon, and I have the opportunity to get ongoing support and coaching from Melissa and from a number of the other teachers that I work with. This professional development has allowed me to add to the toolbox I use to engage with the students that I work with. It has helped with specific plans through hands-on small group work utilizing the Benchmark Phonics program. This program is grade specific to whichever grade I am working with. This year I'm working with grades 1 and 2. And it lets me work with word families and with spelling patterns to increase their level and their comfort and confidence with that to help them become better readers. My schedule allows me to work with one group of second graders, which changes on a regular basis depending on the needs of the students. And it also lets me work with 3 groups of first graders daily, which also changes. All of the aides at our school have a set schedule. We move from classroom to classroom to work with the students and help improve the literacy of each and every one of our little learners. In addition to this, I have the opportunity to go into the classrooms and do reading conferring with the students. Because of the professional development I've received, it's taught me to be very specific in my praise of their growth and to help me focus on where they need additional support to allow them to continue to grow and achieve success. Additionally, I have the opportunity to watch Melissa as I am in her classroom, and I can learn from her as she has learned and utilizes what she's gained through the model classroom coaching. This allows me to take what I can use from her and put it into practice. It has been very successful for me and for the students I work with, as I've seen measurable growth in them in their reading levels, as they continue to grow in fluency, and their comprehension continues to blossom. As those things occur in first and second grade, they become more comfortable and more confident in their reading, and they choose to read more, and it creates an upward spiral for them.
Our professional development with teachers is a time that is built into our schedules in the mornings every other week, opposite of our PLC, our professional learning community time together, because we know and firmly believe in teacher expertise and how important it is to the success of our readers. In this professional development time, we've been deeply studying how readers grow along the reading, writing, and orthographic continuum as they develop their reading. We've also been deeply studying how to notice and name what readers can do, so we can use that to help us set goals and intentionally plan for small group instruction. We believe in the power of our PD being an ongoing and meaningful experience for teachers, where they are deepening their learning in our professional development time together, and then making connections and applying their learning in our PLC process as they continue to study these readers and make action plans for them.
I can speak directly with how meaningful our professional development has been this year in our building. It's been different than in years past, where we would often have professional development, and either it wasn't applicable at the time, and so we would then forget about it maybe until later on it was applicable. Well, now we're able to apply it directly on a daily basis through our guided reading and small group instruction, and it just feels more natural and connected, and I think I can speak for everybody in our building that would agree with that.
So opposite of our PD weeks are our professional learning communities, or the acronym PLCs, where teachers are applying their learning about how readers develop as they deeply study readers and make plans to continue to help them grow. During this time, teachers can either choose a reader or readers they want to study for a cycle or period of time, and they come to PLC ready to collaborate with others who are studying a reader in a similar level. And in that collaboration, they might be collaborating with a teacher from another grade level, or a speech teacher, or a special ed teacher. This time really allows all of the adults who instruct a particular student to have an opportunity to come together to make sure they're on the same page, using the same language, and working on the same goals. We then collect data on the plan we set to accomplish. We reflect and celebrate together as a whole staff before we start the process all over again in the next cycle.
So all of this is lovely, and we want to know, how's it impacting the culture? How's it impacting the teachers, the kids? This is some data from our Performance Culture Index survey, which is a survey out of the book Activate that shows, it's supposed to determine the status of your school as a high-performance culture. So these statements up here, 97 to 100% of our staff agreed or strongly agreed with all of those statements. I'll give you a second to read those. And again, that's all staff. So that's our assistants, that's our teachers, that's everybody in our school. And so you can see that we've created this culture where our teachers believe that they have the ability to impact kids. We take the time to celebrate the data that affirms then that they actually are impacting these kids that are in front of them. Go on to the next one. Here are just a few student data points that we want to highlight. There are lots of different data celebrations from our students, but here are a couple that we're most proud of. As Shannon said earlier, we're studying a group of kids who scored below the 40th percentile on that MAP reading assessment in the fall. And so these are our most complex kids, and we really are wrapping multiple people around these kids to try to figure out what is it that we need to do to accelerate their growth over time. And we believe that if we can figure out what to do for this group of kids and apply it to everybody in our school, we should see growth throughout the whole building. So 7 students with IEPs at this point in the year are on track to make over a year and a half's worth of growth within one school year. And so we know that we're closing that gap over time with these 7 kids already. We have 8 students who already at this point in the year have made over a year's worth of growth in just a half a year's worth of time. And that's based on their reading level, both of those first 2 data points. We have 4 of our kindergarten and first grade learners who did not meet the fall benchmark on PALS. That's their literacy screening assessment. They're over halfway to meeting the spring benchmark, so they're on track to make that goal at the end of the year. And then we have 9 students who scored below the 40th percentile, that group that we're studying, who now at the mid-year point have scored above the 40th percentile. And one of the really cool things about that is that those 9 students come from every single classroom in our building. So every teacher had at least one student where they saw tremendous, tremendous growth from that subgroup of students. We asked our teachers how PD and professional learning communities are impacting their practice, and these are true quotes from our teachers, a 3rd grade teacher and a special education teacher. And so to wrap it all up, I just had to run and steal this book from Jody's office, but I think this synthesizes our thinking around why implementing this model this year has been so powerful. It's from the book Activate by Phil, and it says, the idea that a single teacher working on her own can do everything to meet the diverse needs of many learners is an idea whose time has passed. Our teachers and youth deserve an opportunity to draw on the collaborative power of teamwork that has become the key to success in every high-performing organization in our economy. And so that really has been our focus this year. At the end of last year, we came together to write a new collaborative vision for our school, and it was connect, grow, impact. And we believe through our implementation of this model that that's exactly what we're on our way to doing this year.
So questions, comments from the committee? Dr. Piazzik.
Thank you very much for all of that. What I really like about the focus here is on data. So it sounds like, generally speaking, well, not generally, but all in, teachers agree that you're looking at data. Mm-hmm. What's the frequency that you're reviewing things like progress numbers?
So we are reviewing, well, teachers are reviewing it on the daily within their practice. And that's something I think that we've seen increase this year is the frequency with which they're really looking at that data and using it to plan. But then as a whole staff, every other week we meet, and the first thing that we do is we look at our scoreboard of the kids in this subgroup and we see what celebrations do we have that we can note, and then where are there areas for growth. And then we take those areas for growth that are specifically related to certain students, and those are the kids that we're then studying in that meeting as a team to see, like, what do we need to change? What do we need to stop doing? What should we start doing? So every other week we're reviewing classroom level data, and then 4 times a year, we're looking at our data across like the entire school to figure out, do we have the right kids in intervention? Do we have the right layers of support in place to make sure that overall as a school we're moving forward as well?
Thank you. And does this strategy help you earlier identify students who have special either learning delays or dyslexia or other potential interventions that they might need? I know sometimes we struggle identifying those early. Is there an advantage here?
Yeah, Emily, as the kindergarten teacher, I don't know if you want to speak to your experience with looking at data this year.
Yeah, I have a very intricate group of subgroup kiddos, but they really have given me a lot of information, these data points, and the opportunity to connect with Shannon, but also with other teachers, and especially teachers of different specialties, like special ed teachers. It's helped me understand the needs that they have.
Maybe just one clarification. I just had in my mind, there was one slide that you showed that had numbers of kids who had made progress. Mm-hmm. Are those all unique students, or is some overlap between those groups?
Overlap.
Okay.
Yep, yeah, so if you want to go back to that slide, the data point about like 9 students who scored below the 40th percentile on MAP, those would be many of those students would also be included in those first 2 data points. Okay. And it's two different assessments that are both showing that they're making growth.
Okay,
yeah.
That makes sense, thank you.
Anyone else? Ms. Ratty.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Just curiosity. You mentioned that you share celebrations and growth opportunities with the children. How are those things communicated, and to who? I guess to anyone. So when you're reviewing this data, there's growth and there's growth opportunities that the students need. Who do you communicate that to, and how do you do that?
To start off those bi-weekly PLC times, we have, and we invite you to come and see our colorful board in our teacher room there, in our book room, and it has sticky notes all over it right now, and they're of all different colors, so it's very bright. And so during that first beginning part of our PLC, we're just popcorning out ideas and celebrations that we've each had within our focus for our PLC during that time. And so that's one way that as a building, we can see at a glance, when you just walk in there, you can see, oh, well, Melissa's celebrating this, or so-and-so. So it's just from everybody in our building of how we're focusing, so we can see that as a team.
How's that shared with the students and their families or caretakers?
I think another way that we share celebrations and growth areas with our students is through our intentional and thoughtful plans with our small group interactions with students. So during the small group lessons, we're studying those readers really specifically and noticing things that they're doing well, and we're naming that and telling them that during the small group time that we have with them, and also noticing what they might need next steps in, and we're using those next steps to intentionally plan our prompting language, our specific strategies we're going to work with them within the small group, and we're making sure to communicate that strategy with them so they know how to start internalizing and transferring that teaching to their independent reading.
And then go ahead.
And our latest PLC cycle was focused like solely on prompting, or our latest PD cycle. So it follows like the pattern of teaching and then reinforcing and praising. So I think that's something that like as teachers we're still growing and doing, but like using the right verbiage to praise your students when they're like practicing that reading behavior that you worked so hard on with them. And from a kinder teacher perspective, and I'm sure this is something that I think all the teachers at our school do innately, is just like at pickup or sending a quick email home or a quick text home and just being so proud of all this growth that we've seen.
That's what I was going to say, Emily. I think that you all do an awesome job of just daily communication with families. Nobody wants to wait until conferences to hear like, whew, my child's doing great, or like, ooh, we really got some things to work on. And so that's definitely something that I hear from our families, that they feel like they're a part of it because teachers are out there before school, after school, connecting with them on the daily. And then just more formally, at our last PTA meeting, we shared this performance culture index data. At the upcoming PTA meeting, we're actually sharing this exact presentation with the PTA crew. We want to keep them informed on our plans and those data celebrations as well.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anything in the area of additional in-service training or additional workshops for parents that you've either done or maybe thought of doing in the future?
That's a great question. We haven't done anything formal, I would say, in the last year or so for our families. Oh, I just heard an echo. Sorry. But again, I think that our teachers are doing a nice job of making that homeschool partnership. You know, I actually work with a first grader on her reading, and the classroom teacher and I are always talking, and we just sent home a bookmark recently that had specific prompting language on it for the family. And I know, I'm not the only person doing that. But again, I think that the in-services and those trainings are great, but we're trying to get at it at the specific student level. And so I know that teachers are sending home specific language for parents to use with their kids as they're reading with them at night, or communicating through classroom newsletters around, this is a math strategy that we've learned this week and you can try it at home in this way. So I think, it's happening more informally based on where the kids are at and what they need.
Right. And it sounds like that's, I guess, in my experience, more effective than the one or two workshops that maybe a lot of parents can't attend.
Yes, yeah.
If you're doing it daily and ongoing, so. Good job. And any areas that you'll continue, anything new that will be happening that you haven't presented tonight between now and the end of the year? Or will you stay on the same course? I mean, I'm not saying you don't have enough to do, because you obviously do.
Yeah, no, we will definitely stay on the same course. There's not going to be anything new. What we've heard from people is that, from our staff, is that they feel like the plan is very simple and focused, and that's what we're trying to do. We can't throw too much, new at people, and so our goal this year is really to go deep and study those kids, and so that's what we're going to continue to do for the rest of this year. Shannon did mention earlier this idea of the multiplier effect with model classrooms. A lot of the time so far has been spent with Shannon doing some really explicit coaching in those model classrooms, and so what we're looking forward to in this second half of the year is going beyond just the informal impact that those model classroom teachers have on other people, but to like really purposefully now using those classrooms as like a learning lab for other people to get into.
Great. Anything else from the committee? Very proud of your work that you're doing at your school. Looks like you're on track, and I just see lots of buy-in from all of you, and I can see that your hard work and extra efforts, collaboration are paying off, and just continued success to all of you. Thank you very much for what you're doing at your school.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here tonight. We are moving on with general business. We are now in the section of our meeting where there is an opportunity for citizens to speak. Each individual will be allowed 3 minutes of time to speak in order for us to hear from each of you, and then move on with the agenda of our meeting. You will be signaled as a speaker at the 2.5-minute mark in order to allow you to wrap up any comments that you have. We expect all speakers to honor our time limit, refrain from using any inappropriate language in any manner, and to be respectful in their comments. Speakers who do not meet these expectations may be prohibited from speaking at future board or committee meetings. We also expect the audience to be respectful of the speaker and of the Board of Education, refrain from responding with verbal comments, cheering, applause, or any other behavior that will distract from the meeting this evening. Please note that no obstructions can be created between the board and the audience, and the area behind the podium will be clear during public comment. Also, in order to respect our speakers and meeting participants, please silence your cell phones. Speakers are here tonight to address the Board of Education and not the audience. We do have 7 speakers this evening, so the time limit will be 3 minutes. We do have, our first speaker tonight will be Sarah Harrison. So welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. I come before you today to speak about the potential merger between Whittier and Hatfield Elementary Schools due to concerns about enrollment, finances, and student services. While I would love to see both of these schools stay open, I don't know enough about the financial background to know if that's feasible. However, I do know, based on other factors, that we should look to find a solution that can be better service to our students than simply combining those two schools. Whittier and Hatfield both have high at-risk student populations. On the 2020 to 21 DPI report cards, Hatfield had 77.3% and Whittier had 79.5% economically disadvantaged students. Those are the two highest percents in our elementary schools. When we look at students with disabilities, Whittier had the second highest percent of students at 23.2%, and Hatfield had the third highest at 24.3%, and they were both behind Lowell, which was actually the highest at 25.4%. So we have two different factors that impact students' educations that are both very high in both of these schools. And given these statistics, it's not surprising to learn that these two schools had the lowest two overall scores in the 2020-21 report cards for our elementary schools. Whittier was at a 64, and Hatfield was at a 59.8. So bringing all of these at-risk students together into one building is not the best option for our students and their quality of education. Either keeping both open, if possible, if feasible, or redistricting our elementary schools to spread out some of these students across various buildings would much better service their educational needs. Simply combining these two schools puts the education of our students currently attending Hatfield and Whittier at an even higher risk. I ask that as you go forward with this process, that you please address these key questions as you're deciding what to do. How will we ensure that this large population of at-risk students currently attending Whittier and Hatfield can thrive in their new educational environment? How will student transportation work on a permanent basis?
30 seconds.
Past school closings have forced students to transfer to a different school if they needed transportation. How will the school district of Waukesha support students and teachers and parents before and after transitioning to the new school alignment? I look forward to hearing answers to all of these in future meetings, and I thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Next this evening, Samuel Dmico. Welcome, Samuel.
Good evening. Tonight, I'd like to start off with a few hand-raising questions in which I'd invite administration to answer as well. Please raise your hand if you have taught in an elementary setting. Please raise your hand if you are a current or former special education teacher.
Excuse me. Wait, no interaction. No interaction. We know that. This is not appropriate. Yeah.
Please raise your hand if you are a current or former elementary school principal. I am here this evening to speak in opposition to the Whittier-Hatfield school closure plan, and here's why. At Whittier, only 11% of students are proficient in English, only 11.6% are proficient in mathematics, with 0% of students advanced in either subjects, this according to the Wisconsin DPI report cards. At Whittier, 79.5% of students are low income and or below the poverty line. That number is 77.3% at Hatfield. Whittier and Hatfield are two schools with some of the highest numbers of low-income students within our district, mostly due to the placement of these schools, primarily in low-income neighborhoods. Now, every member here has expressed support at one time or another in some way for smaller class sizes. They've mentioned how it can increase education quality and its optimum specifically for education, elementary schools and special education settings. Well, combining the two schools would give the school a population of around 400 students, the fourth highest in elementary schools within the school district of Waukesha. Whittier has a student-to-teacher ratio of 9-to-1. Hatfield is closer to 11-to-1. However, with this merging plan, it is projected to go as high as 17-to-1 for the combined school, lower or higher. Merging these two schools will inevitably increase class sizes, decrease teacher prep time, limit the amount of one-on-one time students can have with teachers, especially while most teachers don't even have the time to do this now. All without providing additional resources to balance this change. The two elementary schools that are being proposed to merge have some of the highest numbers of special education students, and this plan will add more children per classroom, specifically in special education settings, and will take time away from the relationships that need to build in special education
30 seconds.
Think about the plan, and I hope on March 9th you will make the right decision and vote no to close. I will say on the, I think it was the May Policy Committee, there was a hand-raising question not asked by me about if you have ever taught in any setting. Greg Dietz and Kelly Piasek had raised their hand. It's very hypocritical to call out Greg Dietz. Thank you.
Thank you, Samuel. Next this evening, we have Marquel Moore. Welcome, Marquel.
Good evening, everyone. I want to start off by saying, you know, I've heard people in this room talk about children from low-income backgrounds, and they don't speak for me. As a black man who grew up in poverty in Milwaukee, I knew what it took. I didn't let statistics define me. What defined me was my merit and hard achievement in school, and those teachers who had the highest expectations for what I could do. And because of that, I became a school teacher. But I can go on about that topic tonight, but I choose not to, because again, some of these folks who never lived in poverty do not speak for me. Now, I came here to speak on that topic, but my direction for tonight's topic has changed after reading what a community member wrote in regards to the controversial books in our schools. One community member said, students will likely be moving into adult roles in a short time, so deciding these types of books for them should not need parents' input. In addition, the kids will have to navigate their own lives one day. While it's true that our students will have to navigate their own lives one day, collectively, we as a community should be disturbed at the fact that there is a notion that parents have no say-so in what books should be allowed in schools because these students are still minors. And yes, we are aware that kids will navigate their own lives one day. Let's remember the key word, what they are right now. They're kids, which means that they are purely innocent and should not be exposed to anything that their parents, our stakeholders in this district, may find controversial or inappropriate for their age. Whether students are in elementary school or high school, they are all minors, and again, will navigate their own lives one day. But as an uncle of two beautiful girls in this district, I would hope and expect that my nieces navigate their own lives by the morals and values we instill in them at home, such as not drinking or partaking in drugs, not being exposed to sexually explicit content in books at school, waiting for marriage to have children, and ultimately live a meaningful life, one that is principled. When parents find books or anything that is considered inappropriate for students to learn regardless of their age, they have every right to make their voices heard. Again, they are our stakeholders. Communities are stronger when parents are invited to the table regarding the discussion of books. Communities in the education system weaken when parents are ignored. Is this a clear direction that parents' children belong to the state? Or are we going to be leaders in empowering our parents by inviting them to the table, responding to their concerns about the books that are being used in our schools? Because only then will we as a school district become the beacon for what so many schools, parents, and teachers have long hoped for. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marquel. Next this evening, Paul Reese. Welcome, Paul.
Good evening. Thanks to Amanda, Bill, and Greg Dietz here, the number of students failing at least one class or more in 2019 at North was 54, and in 2020 that number rose to 292, an increase of 440.7%. In 2019, Waukesha South had a total of 135 students failing at least one class or more, and in 2020 that number rose to 387 for an increase of 186.7%. In 2019, Waukesha West had a total of 74 kids failing at least one class or more. In 2020, that number rose to 286 for an increase of 262.2%. Wow, we do good here, don't we? And I listen to these teachers talk here tonight, and they talk about how far our kids are behind. Imagine that, you take a year and a half off and you tell them that the world's going to end and to be afraid of one another and fear is what drives them. They don't succeed. And so now we have to play catch up with all our kids. I remember Joe Cuomo telling we have a lost generation. Thanks to you three, we have a lost generation. We have to make up time. They have to make up time. You guys don't. They do. They're the ones that will live with the consequence. We don't ask for more in this district. We compare ourselves to Madison, Milwaukee, Kenosha, and Racine. How about Oconomowoc, Mugwanago, New Berlin, and Pewaukee? How about we start comparing ourselves to those school districts instead of the ones that are 50 miles away from here or more? You know, where are the expectations that the school district holds? What do we hold for standards? 40 percentile is that a bar we're supposed to? Maybe if we say we got so many kids among the 10 percentile, we'll really look good. Wow, look how well we're doing. Pat ourselves in the back again. You know, I have a hard time with this. I have a hard time that 40 percentile is an achievement goal. I have a hard time that what we expect out of kids is very little. The drive for excellence here was gone for the last couple of years, just gone. We made excuses after excuses for things, why we couldn't do our job, why we couldn't show up, why we couldn't do anything. While everyone else went to work and did their damn job, they couldn't. Someone had to teach my kids after parents and guys I work with would work all day.
30 seconds.
And a buddy of mine works at St. Cobain. He works in silicone injection molding. So all your PICC lines, like in IVs, are all done through that process. If they don't go to work, you die. It's over. There's nothing to be made for that. Guys like that have to go to work. So other people can make excuses why they can't do their job because they're afraid of something that isn't going to do anything to them. Anyways, thanks.
Your time.
Thank you, Paul. Next this evening is Stacey King.
Welcome, Stacey.
Good evening.
I know Mr. Como isn't here, and I will say it again next week, but I wanted to apologize to Mr. Como for a statement I made last month. He, in fact, did not vote for hybrid. He did vote for 5 days a week. However, Ms. Roddy, Mr. Dietz, and Bill Baumgart sure voted for hybrid, and that created an education nightmare for our students and families. It caused massive failures of classes and disengagement of students, which was just spoken about. I heard many times last week from these 3 board members that they just didn't know. How could they know? Well, guess what? Parents knew. We knew. We knew the closures were detrimental to our children, both their education and their mental health. I stood here for the very first time in July of 2020 with so many other parents begging the 3 of you to put our children first. We knew. We were right. We were right about it being safer in school than not. We were right about masks and quarantines. We knew the harm you would do to them by shutting them out of school was far worse than the virus for our children. We knew. You should have known too. So, that's the past. Now we're going to talk about the agenda and the books. I'm very excited tonight to learn about the status of the audit of our books in the libraries and the classrooms. It is long overdue that this get done. I want to know where we are on the approval process to place books. How is this changing so we don't end up in the same mess that we are in now? Many parents no longer trust the judgment of our schools to provide age-appropriate materials to students, so parents need to be provided with information to make a decision for their child. I just got a notification that my daughter checked out a book. It tells me nothing about the book, nothing at all. It tells me a title. I would have to go read the book to know if it was appropriate for her or not. Now, I understand this was done as a quick first layer, but I hope we are working on a solution to put an additional layer in there to let parents know. Some of you, Mr. Dietz and Mr. Baumgart, have been on this board a long time, and these books came into to your schools under your watch. Now, I hope you will move forward and help get them out. Our children are being sexualized at an early age. In a million years, I would have never thought this would come from their schools, but it's been allowed. My last few seconds, we also need to be more balanced in our libraries, both sides of the aisle, and it's not there. We need to do better with that. Thanks.
Thank you, Stacey. Next this evening, Amanda Anderson. Welcome, Amanda.
Is there any chance that the other 2 people after me can come up with, because we're all reading like a simultaneous speech?
So it's all 3 minutes?
Yes. No, I mean like my 3, their 3. We're all under 3 is what I'm trying to say, but we're all reading the same speech, if that makes sense, just a different part of it.
So you're all, you're a combined 3 minutes?
No.
It's a letter. Each person wants to do their 3 minutes.
Yes, please. Yeah. It's turned in order.
Oh, it's turned in order?
Yes. Can we like just stay all up here though? Do you know what I mean?
Kelsey Draves, is that another one?
Yeah.
And then, is it Jana? Jana?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. It'll just flow better that way.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Good evening, my name is Amanda Anderson. I have 4 children in the district, 1 going to South next year, 1 to Les Paul, and 2 still in elementary. I come to you tonight as a parent who has had students at Whittier Elementary for the past 8 years. I've served on the Whittier PTO as the treasurer for the past 4, and as both the president and treasurer for the past 2. I've also subbed almost daily in the district for 2 years, with the exception of the year I took off to homeschool my children due to COVID. And all of my subbing experience every day has been at Whittier and Hadfield. I say all of this not because I need you to know who I am, but because I have a unique perspective on the Whittier and Hadfield schools. I will start by saying the proposed closing and combining of these schools is not something I can support as a parent or as a teacher. I know that one of the main reasons this proposal is being suggested is because of the numbers, mainly the financial numbers. But today I ask you to consider some other numbers that I believe are more important. Did you know that when looking at the district data submitted to the DPI for the last 5 years, that Whittier and Hatfield Elementaries have served a population of students that are on average 73% economically disadvantaged? This is 17% more than any other elementary school in the district. In fact, it's 64% more than Rose Glen and 59% more than STEM. Both schools also serve the highest number of homeless students. Did you know that these two schools, with the exception of Lowell, also have the two highest populations of special education students with the exception of Lowell, and with the exception of the dual language schools, also have the highest minority populations? You may be wondering now what all of these numbers mean. It means that the school district of Waukesha is proposing to combine two of the most at-risk elementary school populations in the whole district. One school that would house the majority of our economically disadvantaged, special education, and minority students. A school that is the epitome of modern-day segregation. The Economic Policy Institute states that social and economic disadvantage, not only poverty, but a host of associated conditions, depress student performance, and concentrating students with these disadvantages in racially and economically homogeneous schools depress it further. Is this really what we want for our students in our district, to decrease student performance? Our kids deserve better. These kids deserve a high-quality education and the same advantages as their peers at other elementary schools. How can we possibly meet the needs of those students and excel at learning by putting them all in the same building? Research also shows that in schools with high proportions of disadvantaged children, remediation becomes the norm, and teachers have little time to challenge exceptional students. In schools with high student mobility, turnover similar to Whittier and Hatfield's, teachers spend more time repeating lessons for newcomers and have fewer opportunities to adapt instruction to students' individual strengths and weaknesses. When classrooms fill with students who come to school less ready to learn, teachers must focus more on discipline and less on learning. These are just a few of the effects this decision could have. It is also important to note that currently Wisconsin is the least racially integrated state in the nation, and our district is seeking to perpetuate that when we have the power to do the opposite. If you have to close a school due to budget reasons.
Thank you for respecting the time.
Another number that is impossible to ignore is the number of behavioral incidents in these two schools. As a substitute teacher, Amanda has seen that this is one of the main concerns that she has. While she adores the students that she has chose daily to teach in these buildings, one cannot ignore the simple fact that teaching in these schools is not easy. These two schools currently account for 37% of all behavioral incidents, 47% of all school suspensions, and 41% of all out-of-school suspension in an elementary school setting. She cannot speak for Hatfield, but she knows Whittier has come a long way in developing a system to address student behaviors, but it has been taking a lot of time and valiant efforts from devoted and relentless and resilient staff. It has taken years for our staff to become the community that they are today. She has witnessed staff day in, day out give up their prep periods and their lunch periods to work with students on behavioral and learning. She spoke with a student spoke with a teacher just this week who said that she had given up all her prep time and only had 15 minutes to prep for the whole week. And this experience is not an exception. When a staff leaves for the day, they are physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausted from the amount that they have given to the students and families. Because of this, even with the most amazing staff, burnout is high, staff retention is low, and in the last 10 years, Whittier alone has lost 57 of their staff members without retirement. It is a plan combined to the plan combined to these two schools. What is the plan to deal with the behaviors that we already know exist? How do we plan to support our amazing staff who has been dealing with significant burnout this year? How do we plan to deal with the behaviors while providing students with a high quality of education? How do we keep our kids safe? It has been proposed that Whittier will be the school to close. Another reason that we have a hard time with this is Whittier has a great relationship with South High School. The relationship is beneficial for our entire school district. The high school students frequently volunteer to school events and to the classrooms at Whittier. Right now, the kids will just walk down the hill during their class periods and walk back up before their next class. By closing Whittier, this relationship is almost impossible to continue because there isn't enough time and resources to bus these kids to Hatfield. Finally, if you plan on continuing with this merger of these two schools, we'll open enrollment to these families who are not comfortable sending their kids to this new fragile school that will be open for them. Will you consider fanning out the students and
30
redistricting?
seconds. our school population and making it more equitable, but instead of putting these two schools together. We are immensely concerned about the merger and have yet to see a solid plan moving forward for the next year that will help parents feel more confident about this decision. The staff gives tirelessly and selflessly to these schools while not giving any input or decision before, they were not given any input or decision before this proposal. And I'm done.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, the staff gives tirelessly and selflessly to these schools, and they were not given any input on this decision before proposing this merger to the board. We were at the Whittier, Amanda was at the Whittier staff meeting when they were told of this proposal about a week ago, and we think it's of the utmost importance to let the board know, as well as the parents of this district, that the first concerns and questions out of the staff's mouths were not concerning their own job security, but for the well-being and the education of their students. We are so blessed to have such an amazing staff. How is it that the people who work with these students day in and day out were not given the opportunity to weigh in on such a significant and impactful decision before it was ever proposed? When businesses merge, there is a definite plan moving forward, weighing the pros and cons and addressing all of the issues before the merge is complete. We do not have much time until the end of the school year, and certainly not a lot of time to really make sure that all of the needs of the students are not only being met, but that they receive a high-quality education. We beg of you all to dig deep and ask yourselves, would you send your child to this fragile, new, high-risk school, or is there a better way forward? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our last speaker this evening, Renee Messerschmidt. Welcome, Renee.
Evening. I have two children that attend Whittier Elementary School. My time here is short, so I will keep it blunt. This is an incredibly unwise decision to merge the two schools with the highest percentage, 37%, of behavioral issue incidences of students into one location. Large classroom sizes with less staff and teachers is a recipe for disaster. Teachers will potentially be too busy monitoring the increase of behavioral incidences in the classroom and less time teaching the students. Students who had no prior educational issues will be at risk of falling behind academically with less time dedicated to lessons. The letter sent home from the superintendent citing the merger will provide more stable full-time staff is untrue. We know this merger will cause job loss for teachers and staff, not to mention how this will push good teachers out and that will not want to deal with the unfair disadvantage they will be forced to deal with if they stay. We will have teacher burnout, leading to more good teachers being lost and our children falling behind. We ask you to not just think about the bottom dollar and to strongly consider what is going to benefit the children in these two schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Okay, that concludes our public comment section for this evening. Moving on to our action items. We do have one action item this evening, approval of our Teaching and Learning Committee meeting minutes from January 4th, 2022. Be looking for a motion. Thank you, Mr. Baumgart.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Roddy. Any discussion, questions, addition, changes? Seeing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes Stacey 4-0. I did forget to mention that Mr. Como is on this committee and he has been excused this evening. Moving on with our agenda, then to our discussion information items. First, we have the item of overnight field trips and international travel. And I will be turning that over to Ms. Landish, our Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dietz. So a couple things. I guess thank you, my chaperones, for being here. I wonder if you could all come up to the table while I kind of intro this to the board here. We have this as a discussion item tonight, just to kind of cap and review last November. So in November of 2020, we did have a motion come to this board to approve a temporary hold on overnight field trips for the 2020-2021 school year. And we put a hold on overnight trips other than the state and national competitions for like our sports and clubs, okay? That motion since then has expired. The reason we have brought these two groups in front of you today is because these two trips were approved well in advance before this motion was put into play. So the board had approved these trips. In one instance, this has been postponed, I think, at least 2 times. And so doing our due diligence, and I will have to thank Stacey for her tremendous work and communication with the chaperones on this. Both of these countries that are that have been approved are currently under a travel for advisory in each of the countries, which is a do not travel. And so we are, no decisions have been made by the chaperones. There perhaps are some individual decisions being made by parents, and I think we might have some survey data here, at least from one of the groups, to give that information to you. But this is just an opportunity for the board to discuss this unique situation with both of these trips. I will also say that we do have our first international trip coming forward to be considered next month for the board. That is a June 2023 consideration. So we could do a number of things depending on what the board wants to discuss and decide tonight, but I do have the chaperones here available. We could do any number of things, including any type of recommended action bringing back in March. So just opening up the table for discussion tonight with all the groups involved.
Sounds good. Thank you. Mr. Baumgar.
I think it would be good to hear what you're talking about with regard to the families that have responded to this issue and where they are, because I think that would have an insight in what we're thinking.
Sure. Sure. I'm Katie Dreffs, and I teach French at Les Paul Central.
My name is Jenny Rath. I teach French at Butler and at West.
And as all of the travel things were going on, we wanted to survey our parents and find out what they were interested in doing, because for our trip, we organized our trip in 2019, and so it has already been deferred one time, and we wanted to know from our parents, would they be interested with all of the current restrictions in Canada, because we want to take our kids to Quebec, what would they be interested in doing? And Jenny has your survey has the results up at the top. Of our 69 travelers, 60 responded. 29 of them said that they would like to attend the trip as originally scheduled in June. 41 said that they would rather postpone the trip to June of 2023, and 6 said that they plan to cancel. They just weren't comfortable with traveling at all with the current situation. Because again, when we planned this trip, there was no pandemic, and I don't think we would have planned one if there was a pandemic. But
to clarify, we gave the respondents the option of checking both boxes if they wanted to attend this summer or next summer. because some would be willing to travel this summer, but also if the group or the board decided to postpone, would go along with that option as well, which is why the numbers add up to more than 60.
And should I speak for?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I'm Jamie Dringenberg, the orchestra teacher at Waukesha West. Rolando Martinez from Waukesha North isn't here this evening, but he is also attending this trip to Germany and Austria for our orchestra trip. Our numbers are much smaller. We only have 12 paying participants who will be attending this trip right now. And we did have one family that decided to cancel just last week, that the mom decided to cancel based on vaccination requirements. And that was their decision. That's, you know, the choice that they made. We haven't heard from any other families that are not interested in continuing. We've continued to have meetings to prepare our students, and there's been, you know, participation to those monthly meetings. And in fact, I've had, I know I've had 2 different students who've shown interest. One is likely to still sign up if given that opportunity. And I know Mr. Martinez said that he has had 1 or 2 students as well showing some interest. So they have until February, the end of February. I guess it's February today. Oh my goodness, the end of this month.
Carry on.
Mr. Baumgart.
Given that, I guess it's our country that it says that no travel like this, right? Is that the word is coming from? Joe?
We follow the Department of State's travel advisories. Now, they're making the recommendation that you not travel to an area for a variety of reasons. It could be civil unrest, terrorism, things of that nature. Recently, like being the last 6 months or so, I should say the last 18 months, COVID has definitely impacted that. They've factored COVID as a health risk. I guess the only add that I would have to that is it's given the options that people have for protection, it's the quarantine requirements or the vaccine requirements that do make travel right now tricky with COVID. So if the committee finds that information important. But COVID, it's more your requirement to quarantine in a hotel room if you test positive there, or testing requirements in a country, or vaccine requirement. It's so different depending on the country.
Would you like me to clarify for our trip?
Pardon?
Would you like me to clarify for our trip what okay. I mean, an overview.
Yeah.
So Canada is currently requiring all travelers to go to Canada to be vaccinated. They are also requiring a negative COVID test within 3 days, 72 hours. The United States is requiring travelers, before they come back into the country, within 24 hours, they need a negative COVID test. So it's not just Canada, it's our country too, because if they get the test and they test positive, they can't come back into the country, which would necessitate them to stay in Canada for 5 to 10 days in quarantine.
Yes, thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
It all makes doing it in the 2022 just less and less attractive to me, and I'm not too sure why we want to do that, so.
Yeah, and our parents seem to agree with you.
Thank you.
Dr. Piazza.
What would be the plan if a student tested positive? Would one of the chaperones be staying behind, or would the parents be coming to get them?
We don't.
The parents would, or we would stay, one of the chaperones would stay behind with them. And in the unlikely event of hospitalization, they would fly a parent out.
Actually, we wanted to ask you that. Like, that's what we were talking about, but we feel like this has gone beyond our pay grade, basically. And we wanted, when we first talked to Stacey, we wanted to talk to the district's lawyer to see what the liabilities would be. Because there's so many different things that obviously none of us have ever dealt with, and we would want to make sure that we dotted all our I's and crossed all our T's. We wanted to know what the district policies were, if any, and ask you, the board and administration for, you know, if, there's so many different concerns, we could go on all night, but when we talked, we thought that probably it would need to be a employee of the school district, but we don't know. So quite frankly, we don't know the answer to your question because we don't know if these policies already exist and what they are.
For my trip, I'm with a different company that we're using, and as far as the liability is concerned, I know that my travel consultant commented, and she commented the fact that the parents have a contract with their company, and their company holds that liability, as opposed to the school district. So, like, there's no contract between the district and that company. So I'm in a similar, like, quandary as well. I'm not certain what the answer is as far as an adult being with a student if they test positive. I'm not sure the answer. I do know that my travel company, and that's a question I would certainly ask them, but I do know that World Strides will do all of the arrangement of, you know, any quarantining that's necessary, and I'm sure it's the same. Many companies are doing the same, and they will pay up to $2,000 of covering any additional costs that would be incurred as well. So I don't know if that includes flying a parent out or what that would be, but I'm certainly willing to look into that answer.
Yeah, ours is almost the same.
Yeah.
Dr. Cook?
I was just going to add one of the things that needs to be considered, and we've heard about it from international travel, is that you isolate in that quarantine. And so if you have a middle school or early high school age student who's got to isolate for a 5-day period of time, 10-day period of time, whatever it is, before they can move, they may be in that room by themselves. And I think that that's something that the committee needs to consider, and any decisions that are made is just because we have a staff member there, this goes beyond a liability thing. Just because we have a staff member there, do we want a student to be in a room by themselves while quarantining?
Ms. Roddy?
Yes, thank you. For both trips, what is your deadline for canceling? And if you do cancel, what's the cost? Is there money, what money is lost?
Since you just talked to Dale, do you want to handle that?
I can answer.
Go ahead.
Pretty easily. So as of right now, I'm 131 days out from our trip departure date, and there's a greater amount that is lost with each date. So for right now, they would receive all money back except for $599. This is a $4,000 trip essentially. So the company would keep $599 plus, any fees, whatever those might be. I'm not certain what that means. And that's until 109 days before departure, so I believe that's the 22nd of this month. Beyond that, then it becomes a greater 50% of all of the fees plus a 99 non-refundable fee, and then 75% at 75 to 31 days, and then 100% at 30 days or less. There's a depreciation there.
Ms. Stringenberg, for your trip, have all the students raised all the money needed?
No, I currently have 3 participants who are paid in full. As I said, it's a contract between them and World Strides, so the money isn't going through me. There are some who've done some fundraising that at the end, I can, we pay that out of they bill us for that, but there are 2 who as of today are at less than $1,000 left to pay. But by the end of this month, it would be, I think it was 5 or 6 of them who would be at that point, so under $1,000 left. So many, over half are almost paid.
Dr. Piazza?
What would happen to the fundraising dollars if the trip is canceled? Can those students apply that to something else?
In my case, yes. It's an independent student account that is sitting in our, what's it called, the Fund 10, or is that the right name?
Mm-hmm.
We actually don't. Yeah. It's our activities account. It sits in that.
Yep. And for us, our date February 24th was our 110 days out that we, were hoping to make a decision by. But when we realized that we wouldn't have a decision tonight, I called. Our company that we deal with is pretty small, and they're pretty, they're great at working with us. And I said, well, we won't know until early March what's really going on. And she said, well, we can defer that. So we will have time until after you've made your decision to let the families know, whether we can defer those who want to cancel, the different dates and things like that.
Dr. Piotr?
If I understood correctly, the forfeiture on the Canada trip was different depending on if they were forfeiting because of the vaccine passport requirement versus other reasons?
Yes.
So would other reasons be that, for example, collectively we decided or all decided not to go on the trip, but some were willing to meet the vaccine requirement versus, or postponing. Postponing, I'm assuming we don't forfeit anything, or is there?
Correct.
Still a
They
fee?
will still get, if we postpone, they will still get the 2019 prices.
Okay.
Which is pretty incredible because things have gone up so much. So they're actually going to be getting a really great deal if we can defer. And the other thing about deferring, which is nice, is it puts the vaccine decision in the hands of the parents, not of the Canadian government.
Ms. Roddy?
Thank you. This was planned a little while back. How many of these students are going to age out if we postpone?
By age out, do you mean turn 18?
That or, because this was supposed to have been like an post-eighth grade trip, correct?
Correct.
8th and 9th.
Okay.
And then, so I think
Our oldest students are now in 10th grade, so if we were to postpone again and get your approval for that, then the oldest students would have just finished their junior year if they choose to continue on with this trip.
And do we typically do trips with eighth graders and juniors?
Well, they have to be past 8th grade in order to travel according to
ninth
our
grade,
district
okay.
policy, but yes, just to clarify.
Okay.
So that would be, 14 to possibly 17?
Thank you.
the other thing that's nice about deferring is that the only people who will be losing money are the people who choose to not go. It wouldn't be, we choose and everybody loses that $450, I believe it is, for our trip if we cancel the whole thing.
If we cancel the whole thing, then each participant would receive a full refund except for, yes, $450. If the group cancels.
How much?
$450.
$450 if the group cancels. And $450 if they cancel for vaccination reasons.
Well, to clarify, if we cancel before April 15th, which one would hope we would.
Yeah,
know
we'll
the
have a
decision by
decision made by then.
Right. Right.
I'll be honest, I haven't discussed deferring an additional year with my families or Mr. Martinez, and if, we head in that direction, I think that would obviously be something we would need to have conversation about with those families. Obviously, you guys have had that conversation. I do know that, again, the company I'm working with will allow for up to 45 days prior to the trip. 60 days, because it's international. That we could work with them to change tour dates. I assume again, if that's the decision that's made. But it looks like it says the group will pay no change fees, just the difference, if applicable, in the price of the new trip. So it looks like we would potentially have to pay changes in pricing.
So I don't want
Ms. Burgess, yeah.
I don't want to shortcut the exchange happening here with questions for our chaperones, but I guess the next step would be, I would look for direction from the board next month. In theory, one option could be that we would bring these two trips back for your action, to take action on, and then we'd have a third new international trip for 2023 to be considered as the third trip, unless you have some suggestions.
Where's that to?
That is to Germany as well. So I'm looking for thoughts here.
Well, if you're talking about March, we'd probably be making a decision, right? But just where I am, and I hate to be the bad guy in the room for this, but I am really right now not in favor of a trip in 2022. Plain and simple. That one is just troubling me. I know we might have a little bit of time to make a decision if all of a sudden the world turns around and looks good. But it's a mess. There is some danger involved in it. There's some lost possibilities for the kids to get into situations that really aren't good, for instance, being isolated into a room or something. Right now, I am not a fan of 2022 traveling. I'm not saying we shouldn't ever do this again, but that one troubles me a lot. And I'm just telling you where I am. I know, I sometimes don't like the big trips that much anyway, but this one has got a real solid reason that I'm not in favor of it for 2022.
May I ask a question? Is that allowed? Okay. Sorry. So timeline-wise, if it is decided in the March meeting that we will not be able to go on this trip, then last time we deferred, we had to basically do another application and submit it for approval again. I would assume that would be the same process, and in assuming that, when would that decision on the postponed trip be able to be made?
Or would we be able to just turn it over?
Well, our past practice has been, I'll just answer from the administration side, then the board can certainly give their input. From the administration side, we have asked for applicants to reapply, as you have. We would still want it to, we do have some leeway with the time that they get the approval to us, so as long as it's in our office, what is the amount of time, Stacey, again?
The policy says 18 months.
Yeah, so 18 months, as long as we have it. So the board doesn't have to take action on it as long as we have it in our possession in 18 months is how the policy reads. Then it could still be considered.
Aren't we within that already right now, though, if we're looking at June of next year?
I think we
Yeah.
would be a month or so short.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they could re-vote it on any time, if that's the question, whenever we would bring it back. So if you decide to go June of 2023, then we could bring it back in April for their approval.
The reason I ask is because I know a lot of parents are very anxious about what is going to happen, and with all the cancellation dates and things like this, I mean, like the April board meeting is right up knocking on the door to the group cancellation date. And it might alter parents' opinions if they won't know until less than 2 months before we would, potentially know if we were going to be able to postpone the trip, which would be a different scenario than canceling the trip.
I would say the only thing that would change that, and I'm just looking at Dr. Cook here to verify this, is if the administration or the board had a recommendation for a motion to put all trips in 2022, 23 on hold, then it wouldn't matter what you brought forward because we wouldn't consider anything during that time frame.
Yeah, I was just going to add that since the trip has been considered in the past, it may be appropriate even in March that one motion was made to postpone and the next would be to approve for the summer of '23. The information is out there. It's not like it's anything new for the committee to consider. It would just be, two motions or two-part motion.
It's just a reasonable way to do it.
Right, and it would help the parents a lot, I think, too.
Right.
Ease their anxiety.
Dr. Piazzi.
Thank you. I think we have to approach these existing trips differently than we would approach approving a future trip, and that would even include if we were to cancel or postpone one of these trips and then consider approving something new. These are expensive trips. The reason why they get approved so early is so that students can do the fundraising and so parents can plan. To be honest, I struggle with international field trips in general. I very much struggle with them right now, just given the circumstances. But I also think this was approved at a committee a year ago, and so parents and students have been planning and they've been fundraising. So the decisions that we're going to make here have to take into consideration things that people have already considered. There was a trip in December that caused a lot of problems because of changes to the itinerary and changes to the requirements. And so my biggest concern is right now that this, regardless, is a district-sponsored trip, and students remain under the supervision of the Board of Education on this trip, these trips, which means we are taking a pretty significant risk of students being quarantined or isolated or not being able to cross borders because of COVID status. And especially in Canada with the vaccine passport requirement, I just think that we are adding a lot of unnecessary risk to trips involving, in the case of the Canada trip, very young students. And I am concerned about the burden of that on the district. Now, I say all of that considering the fact that I do think parents know best what their children should be engaged in. It sounds like there are several parents who are willing to take the risk, and it's not so much the risk of getting COVID, it's the risk of getting quarantined or not passing a test somewhere. I know in that most recent trip, there were complications regarding getting tests, and that created some problems for students, and so the logistics around actually getting tests while the students are abroad is something that we have to consider, and I think that's also a lot for chaperones to consider. You know, what if that place isn't open? What if those test results don't come? So, you know, I'm not going to say I have a crystal ball that I would know how many COVID cases or what variant we're on by June of 2022, but I think, you know, we have to assume that some of these logistics are still going to be pretty complicated. Again, I say all that now knowing that there's some real cost associated with canceling or postponing these trips. And again, as a parent, if I were investing in this for my student, it's a lot of money. The trip is a lot of money, but the cancellation fees are a lot of money. So I don't take that lightly, you know. And we need to find the right balance there, I think.
I also wanted to add that for our trip, we have the possibility that parents may also sign up to come travel with us. So we do have some families who are traveling with 2, 3, or 4 family members with us on the trip. Just for your consideration too.
I have 2 grandparents.
I think the fact of the matter is we still will have minors in other countries who could end up being isolated or quarantined without their permanent legal guardians.
And that's why we wanted to put this survey out to, you know, see how the parents were feeling. And, you know, personally, I would feel more comfortable in 2023 with our kids. And, you know, we'll see what 2023 brings. But right now, it makes me.
I do share Mrs. Roddy's concern with the post-8th grade trip, just in that the age range is getting pretty big. You know, maybe it's a non-issue, but it's.
Well, one thing, we've both taken kids to France many times, and you haven't taken kids to France? Okay. I've taken kids to France many, many times, and a couple of different times to Quebec, and we're often put together with high schools, you know, as the other part of the bus, you know, so it really hasn't been an issue, and it's been really, really cool with the 3 different schools and going to the 3 different high schools, and the kids get to know one another from you know, when they get to the high school, they know some of the kids, you know, some of the kids who come from the other middle schools get to the high school and they know each other. So it's really been, you know, a positive thing. We haven't had this much of a range with our kids, but we have had the range with other groups.
May I address your concern about, that you mentioned testing, like, well, on the trip and stuff, and I do know that World Strides will take care of all of that, arranging for testing and those issues.
Ours as well.
So as far as some of those concerns from the previous trip, I know that some of that is taken care of. So, and I don't feel quite as nervous about the potential of traveling this June, because I know that this company that I'm working with, they had groups traveling last summer, and I am very confident in all of their mitigation and their policies that they have in place, and they have groups traveling this spring as well. I think they said, let me find the number, 70,000 students in the past year that they've had traveling. They've supported international travel to over 30 different countries since January of last year. So I feel like the company that I'm working with, I'm confident in all that they have in place to support a safe travel experience. That does, of course, still leave room for students to have to isolate, and you know that is an issue to discuss. I'd love to get their information as to how many times they've run into that issue in their 70,000 students who have traveled, how many times they've had to deal with that, and what that looks like at a deeper level. But as far as mitigation is concerned, I mean, they have a lot in place, and they would never recommend that we do anything that is unsafe for our students.
So as far as next steps,
March.
Yeah, I'll,
even though I'm hearing a lot of, I won't speak for everyone. I think I have reservations on the trips in June. And I don't see things getting drastically better between now and a month. But
just a yes, clarification question for the board. Is this, the vote as an action item has to be agendized for teaching and learning only, or could it go through another committee for vote? I'm thinking of the full board next week, or do we have to wait an entire month? I don't know the answer on that. I'm just thinking it in my head.
We can move an action to the full board if we want to.
Right.
We don't have to vote here.
Right. We would just have to get everyone the background information that they would need to.
I don't know.
I think out of respect for families and the chaperones and teachers who are involved with this, we should try to move these decisions forward as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Okay, so I could work with Board President Como to figure out where this fits at next week's full board and have the board make a decision next week, Wednesday.
Yep. So
we can come back if you need.
Within a week.
I don't want to speak for everybody else.
I'll be in touch.
I think that's the best way to go.
Perfect.
And will you please let us know if you'd like more? I know I had shared some information with Stacey, but if there's specific information you're looking for from us.
I will try to have our board members, I see one in the audience, so he won't have to listen to it. So we just have maybe a few we need to cover, and between my connecting with them and watching the presentation, they should have the knowledge they need for next week's.
And then if we did have questions, Ms. Landish, we could direct those back to the chaperones so that they would be prepared.
Yes.
To
Should we then prepare in light of potentially postponing or asking for postponement for our trip? Like the discussion that was going on before, should we prepare that application for 2023 just in case for next week, or how would that work?
No, don't worry about that.
Okay,
We'll use the same materials depending on what the board decides.
okay, thank you.
I have one clarifying question, though. Maybe this would just be something to consider if you need to get back to us, but it sounded like for the Germany-Austria trip, it was possible to have students replace other students on the trip. Is that the case for the Canada trip as well?
We have had kids do that as well, yes.
So if there were families that decided to opt out, even if it were postponed, they could give that spot up to someone else and not lose
If somebody
money.
new wanted to join, then yes, they could.
And does the district stand to lose any money or have fees to pay? Or are there scholarships for any of these trips that we would be?
Not
money?
connected to these two.
Okay.
Not competitive.
And I just wanted to say, I don't think that there has ever, this is my 32nd year in the district, and I don't think that there has ever been a more difficult time to be a school board member or an administrator. So I just want to say thank you to all of you for what you do.
Or a teacher.
Yes.
Yes. So good. We have some direction and we'll make a decision next Wednesday.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Good. Thank you so much.
Thanks for
being
your
here.
time.
Yep. Next this evening, we have an update
At midnight.
and discussion information about the Whittier Achievement Gap Reduction Grant. We do have with us here this evening Brandy Hart, the Whittier principal, and we have Melissa Yao, our Director of Elementary Learning, with her as well to talk about some of the recent developments with the utilization of this grant and to give the board an update, which they are required to do through the grant 2 times a year, and this would be your second time here. So welcome, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for that intro. What we are covering today is, again, what is the grant? What are the identified strategy that we're currently using? I'm going to talk a little bit about literacy and the whole child. And then we will share some growth and achievement data for kindergarten through 3rd grade and provide you the action steps of what we are doing for the remainder of the school year. So briefly, AGR stands for Achievement Gap Reduction. This is a program that was established in 15-16, and prior to that it was SAGE. It allows schools to choose between 3 or a combination of 3 strategies: small class sizes, one-on-one tutoring, or coaching, so instructional coaching with teachers. And then the AGR grant, like Mr. Dietz said, requires board presentation twice a year. This is the first presentation, and I'll be back at the end of the school year to give you the second presentation. So this slide shows you which strategies we're currently using, and this is different than previous years. In previous years at Whittier, we've only done small class sizes, and that was how we were making sure we got one-on-one teacher-to-student opportunities, small group instruction, and teachers the ability to scaffold and differentiate for varying needs in the classroom. This year, we have layered that. So this year, number 2 on your screen is new. We have used some of that AGR money to have an instructional coach for teachers. This added intervention, this added coach, instructional coach, is working with kindergarten and 1st grade classrooms only. So she is dedicated to that, those 2 grade levels. Even though AGR covers kindergarten through 3rd grade, she is dedicated to just kinder and 1 to give our earliest learners the focus that they need to become readers. So that is new. I do want to map out what else is happening at Whittier so that you know that it is not just the one AGR coach. Just like Prairie and Hillcrest, you guys have been learning about the PCL model. Whittier is also a PCL school. So
We do have a PCL coach who is working with 2 model classrooms and really making an impact on literacy throughout our building. Last year, I presented to you how much emphasis we've been putting into relationships and really building and knowing our learners. And this year, I think it is the next step. We're going into the progression of knowing our learners, but knowing like how they learn, knowing what they need as learners. So not just that personal connection with our kids. I kind of mapped on your screen a little bit the things that are working in collaboration at Whittier. And so the first one is that PCL model. The second one is K1, really focusing on and saturating our resources to really help our earliest learners. And then this little quote, it's really kind of hard for you to read, but it says, if they could do well, they would do well. And that talks about the proactive planning and behavior that we have happening, which complements all of the learning. It is our goal to make sure that our learners are in their chairs, in their seats, in all of the mini lessons and everything that's happening. So it's really taking us some work together to make sure that the mindset is there, that all individuals that work with kids, I'm talking about assistants and teachers and all staff members, know that kids do well when they can. And that is helping our mindset to make sure that we are able to identify lagging skills that children need in order to be learners in their chairs. So all of this stuff works together. I've highlighted a little bit, like that is our SAIL work. Our SAIL work is all around small group instruction, using data to actually plan for our groups and target what those learners in front of them need. We have also worked closely with a parent engagement committee, which is continuing to extend our relationships in our building with our families, whether it be a behavior meeting, an academic meeting, or just a family engagement fun night that's happening. So we're working with WISPE, which is the Wisconsin Statewide Parent Educator Initiative, and the people from WISPE are like really helping us shape our family engagement so that we are providing what our families need and want. Okay, all of that, let's jump into our data. So as you guys know, we look at running record data in kindergarten and first grade. Kindergarten and first grade do not take the MAP assessment for reading, so that's why theirs looks a little bit different. You see that kindergarten, we did not collect running record baseline data, but I'm going to show you some baseline data in just a minute. We are about 35-39% meeting our goal right now in winter, and our end of the year goal is that 50% or more of the grade level will be performing at the 50th percentile or more. So in this one, it would be 50% of the students are performing at grade level or above in running record. I do want to point out some of the kindergarten baseline data, though, that we do collect. So this on your screen is our letter and sound assessment data. And our kindergarten team collects data on students every single month. Our phonics instruction right now, we're teaching our children how to decode letters and sounds. All of that is essential for them to understand unknown words, and it creates confidence in our readers. So what I want you to see is that in the beginning of the school year, this class right here on the top, class 1, was averaging around 4 to 5 letters and sounds. Like the kids in that class, that's where they came to us knowing. Class 2 was a bit higher, so class 2 is at your bottom. It's our other kindergarten class, averaging 9 letter sounds each. And then when I looked at that, I wondered to myself, I wonder what the kids who were with us in 4K looked like. So I pulled out class 1 and class 2, the kids that were with us face-to-face last year for kindergarten, for 4K, and I noticed that they were the top performers in the classroom. And I want to mention that because it's really important. Like early learning, early education is really important to get kids off to start. I feel like if we really push that, perhaps our achievement gap would not be quite as wide as it is. And I'm just saying that because I feel like I'm a huge supporter of early education. This is December, so this is the data from December for kindergarten. And you can see over here that class 1 has increased to approximately 12 to 13 letter sounds. Class 2 is up to 17, and those 4K students, that cohort of children that did complete 4K face-to-face with us last year, is up to 19. To me, this was very interesting data, and I just wanted to share that with you. I will come back in May and show you how they ended up as well, but I do want to point out that if you look at achievement gap, right here shows you that those 4K students started the school year where our class that was the least performing is now in the end of December. And so I think that's worth noting and how important 4K is for our learners. All right, I'm going to keep going. This is second and third grade MAP data. So this is reading. This is the MAP test. Our goal is 50% of our grade level or more will be performing at the 50th percentile or more at the end of the school year. So we have noticed by looking at our data that we did not maintain in second grade from fall to winter. That means that some of our children that were performing at the 50th percentile in the fall did not perform at that level. When we look at data, I'm going to show you on the next slide how we look at that and where we find where our learners are falling off track. I did also put on the bottom, because I was wondering, again, after seeing the 4K data, how are our kids performing that were with us last year? And I used face-to-face, it's not a full year, but I used if they were with us face-to-face for at least half a year. I looked at that cohort data, and I found that second graders, so last year, the current third grade group that were with us face-to-face at Whittier at least half the year are at about 33%. So we're a touch above with the children that we can hang on. That being said, we will take everyone that comes through our doors and we will educate them where they are. But I do think it's important for us to look at that cohort data and show teachers like we are making an impact, we are making growth. Let's talk about what we do, right? So if you go back to this slide we were just on, we're not okay with saying 19 to 26% of our students are on track. But instead of just being sad about that, we have to do something. So this is a quadrant data tracking form that I showed you guys last time, or last year, that we really use when we are looking at data with our teachers and our intervention teachers and our staff members. I'm going to go through it real quick, but when we see this, we know that anyone in this green, we're really proud of. They're high achieving, they are high performing, they're still growing. All the things we want all of our kids in the green. But if a child starts out at, let's say, the first or 10th percentile, the likelihood of them taking that assessment and jumping up to the 50th is probably not as likely as them showing us high amounts of growth. So then you look over here. Yes, they're still low achieving, meaning they're not performing at the 50th percentile yet, but they are growing. And so these two top boxes, we are very proud of our kids. Once you get up here and you are continuing to grow, then you can make it to the green. These bottom boxes are where we spend most of our time in data delves. So with staff on the 24th of January, we had an hour, and we really dug deep as we could in 1 hour to look at these kids down here in these two boxes. This box is concerning. These are kids that are performing at the 50th percentile or higher, but they're slowing their growth. So we might not keep them in there. We may lose that number. Why is that? Looking into those numbers. And then the pink boxes are most concerning. The pink box means that they're under the 50th percentile and they're not growing fast enough, right? They're not growing at a level that we expect them to, or that we want them to. And this is where we spend a lot of our time in data delves, planning for how are we going to move the children that are in this box up for instructionally, what are we missing? Is it attendance? What is it? And really looking at down to the kid level. Yes.
Just a clarifying question. Thank you. I love this chart. The vertical axis, is that percent of goal? Or how is that measured?
So we put it at 50-50, so 50th percentile, performing at the 50th percentile. I don't know, I can't think of exactly, but I have it 50 over here and 50 over here. Do you remember what exactly that number?
It shows students about the 50th.
So for the student at the 36th percentile of achievement who has achieved 100 on the growth line, what does that 100 refer to?
Okay, so according to all of the people that take the MAP test, this child grew 100% or 99 in the 99th percentile of growth. So they use, sorry, I didn't understand your question at first. They use all of the children that take that test. So all of, I believe these are third graders.
So growth percentile.
Yep, gross percentile. So to us, that's awesome. That's a huge celebration. Are you okay? Is that good?
I follow you, thank you.
Keep going? Okay. All right, let's jump into math. This is math where we started in the fall. Kindergarten through third grade all take the MAP test for math. And you can see that we did have a dip in proficiency from fall to winter on all of our grade levels. In third grade, you see that we had 10. We still have 10, but it is a tiny bit of a dip because we do add students. We lose students throughout the year. So there was a dip seen in all grade levels in math. I did the same thing by looking at cohort and really analyzing like what's happening, like what are students, where are they going, what are all the things. And this is what I found for cohort data. So I pulled out who was in kindergarten and were they with us for at least half of the school year. Same thing for first grade into second, same thing for second into third. And I do find some really great numbers in growth when we have them for more than just a couple of months. That being said, we are committed to serve every single kid that walks through our door, wherever they come from, wherever they are. That's very, very important to us. But I also think it's important to show teachers like we are making gains with the longevity of kids that we have. I don't think we need to go through this one again. This is just a first grade math example. I think I put this one in here because I wanted you to know that as teachers look at, the pink box, we are able to then target skills that we need for intervention groups. So if we find all the kids down here are struggling with, basic numeracy, we can pull an intervention group based on that exact skill and target that they need. So what are we going to do to grow our kids? What are we going to do to accelerate growth that is happening? Here's our plan. We are going to stick to the program of what we've planned with SAIL. We are using SAIL to guide us. And SAIL is, leading us to making sure that we are focused on small group instruction and actually using our data to be responsive to our learners. All of that being said, we are very focused to developing student self-regulation, making sure that we're keeping our learners in the classroom. We are continuing to focus on the fidelity to instructional minutes and making every single minute matter and really count, because if a student misses a couple of days, we have to catch them up and making sure when they're there that they are learning. We are focused on PCL learning and coaching this year. We have 2 model classrooms. We have PCL. Our PCL coach is also doing intervention, deep intervention. She's fantastic. We have an AGR coach, like I mentioned before. She is working with K and 1, both grade levels, as well as intervention. She's pulling groups herself. Through our data delves, we're focusing on closing gaps, making plans for identifying the students that are at the 25th percentile or below. What we're seeing and what I hope to present to you next time at the end of the school year is really how students progress in their percentile gains. For example, if a student's testing right now at the 10th percentile, I hope to come back and say, now they're at the 20th percentile. They're not quite on your 50th yet, but we're getting there. And I feel like every single year we're making a step up in that same direction. And then the last one, and a very powerful one, is our intervention groups. On the 24th, after the data delve with all of the staff, we sat down with our title staff, our PCL coach, our AGR coach, and we talked about how do we make groups that are moving, and really making sure that our groups are fluid and moving through, so our kids are learning. We added, with the use of the CEIS funds, an intervention group to add to that. So we have plenty of intervention that is happening throughout the school in pretty much all of our grade levels, with the highest focus in kindergarten and first grade. And then next steps, really, it's just me coming back to you in May and presenting the data for the full year. But that is all I have, and I can go back to that one if you want to see it again. But otherwise, I'm open to questions that you have for me about Whittier.
Mr. Baumgart.
Thank you. First off, I had written on this piece of paper before I even got here, what about your recognition plan? So you mentioned it. Are you still using it? That was a very solid point you made with us last time.
Knowing our kids? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, recognition, that's what I meant.
Yep,
You seem
so-
that you were focusing on getting everybody to know everybody, kind of a thing.
Yep, and we are still focused on that. It's very, very important, knowing their name, but then our move this year is to really know our learners and know not just their name and that mom just had a baby and that they love to play soccer, but now you're also reading at this level and what's our goal for moving you forward. So using that relationship knowledge that we gained last year to move our learners up and like grow relationships with academic knowledge.
Okay. That might even lead you and me to my next question, which was on your earlier slide, quite simply, if they could do well, they would do well. I'm not sure exactly what you're trying to get across with that. I mean, I can see what your objective is with it, but how does it work? How do you find out if they could do well?
We're going to need a longer meeting, Mr. Ramos. Okay, so we're using the work of Ross Green. And Ross Green his work is all based on the fact of children have lagging skills that they need to build. So for example, let's use reading as an example. A reading teacher teaches skills to move that child up through reading. Same with math, same with writing, we get that. But oftentimes we forget that behavior is not something that comes naturally to everyone. So there are skills that are involved in behavior, and so that's what we're looking at. So that we're treating behavior as almost a subject, almost a content. If frustration tolerance is something you struggle with, well, let's get together. We have very smart people around ourselves. Let's help them, because when they do well, they can. And the whole theory behind Ross Green's thoughts is that no one wants to behave poorly. No one wants to be sent out of the room. No one wants that. So it's our job to look deeper and figure out what do they need.
So again, you're having to deal with the single person.
Yes.
As opposed to
individual.
A classroom.
Mm-hmm. And if we see wow, all of our second graders are struggling with XYZ, then it can't hurt anyone. But forming intervention just around behavior in the same way that we would for a subject area.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Piazza.
Thank you. Thank you again for the updates. How are the PCL coaching and AGR coaching working together or different?
So our PCL coach is our literacy expert. She knows the ins and outs of reading and reading development. Our kindergarten, or our K1 AGR coach was a very highly qualified first grade teacher moving into a coaching role. As a team of coaches, we meet every other week and we talk about how we're coaching teachers, how we're supporting teachers, and what we need to make sure that we're doing that. So they do work together. PCL though she is kind of leading the learning part, if you can think about that. I mean, our AGR coach is right there with her. They are leading PD together. Our PCL coach is going to intensive learning once a month, more than once a month, 2 days a month. And when she learns, she comes back. Her and I meet every single week. She teaches me what she learns. We then give it back to the other coach in our building and then to the teacher. So it's kind of like PCL is happening and learning, AGR is supporting, we come together, we collaborate. So they work together, but also apart. So no one's doing the same work with the teachers, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm.
You have a positive proactive behavior coach too at your school, right?
Yes, he's fantastic.
From everything I've seen, I would agree with that.
Mhm.
Could you tell me how he fits into this at all, or
Mhm.
in any way, shape, or form?
Yep, so he is 50% handling, helping with behavior. He is proactive in meeting with children, meeting with families, setting up meetings. He is leading professional development for our teachers and getting everyone on the same page. He is doing everything he can to move, and all of that goes back to the individual, like individual plans. What works for one kindergarten student that's struggling might not work for the next. And so it really is looking at the children and as an individual, and it takes time. Where he's scheduling a lot of meetings, working with a lot of families, and we've seen some great gains. There's a lot left, to do. We've got a lot of learning and growing all together, but we've seen some great gains.
And he's also a half-time Phi Ed teacher.
Correct,
So
yes.
throughout the years, he has those connections and relationships established with kids
Yes.
that will help in your overall outcomes.
Yep, and he's very well trusted by all kids and their families, which is, putting him a step ahead when it comes to talking about stuff that's tough to talk about.
Yeah, I don't think he mixes any words when it comes to where things are at, in a good
Correct.
way. In a good way.
Yes.
To put things on the line and do what we can to get things back on track.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, I have a great team, and all of those things that we're doing right now, I don't know by themselves, one thing would help. But right now, all together, there's a lot of really great collaboration with everything, and it's very strategic on why we're doing all of those things together.
Yes, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Ratty?
Yes, thank you. Just to quickly add on to that conversation that we just had regarding your behavior coach, another thing to make note about that individual is that they've been there 11 years. So they're stabilizing force within the school itself. So there's an important piece just to add. Now, my question for you is, there are 3 different strategies: the small classes, the coaching. What was that third?
The third one was one-on-one tutoring.
One-on-one tutoring. And you're using the first 2, the small class and the coaching.
Yes.
What was the thought process for selecting those 2 versus the?
So why have we not selected one-on-one tutoring? Because our coach can do intervention, and so instead of targeting just one child, she's taking 2 or 3 or a small group of 4 children, and we felt that by selecting that, we would be able to service more kids by the use of our coach kind of pulling some intervention groups as well.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Fine.
I know when I said at the beginning that this was your second presentation, it actually is, because you talked about the grant.
Oh.
And then you came now, but now you'll be here at the end of the year. So,
Got it.
3 times in one school year. It's a lot to be.
It works. She comes in June.
Yes.
Kind of tell the end of the year and what they're looking towards, so it's a kind of an overlap of the years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. But it keeps us really informed of what's going on and up to date, which I appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
Keep up the good work, and we look forward to having you back in May to give us a summary of even more successes.
Awesome. Thank you.
And pass it along to your team as well.
Will do. Thank you very much.
Appreciate their extra efforts. Yes, thank you. Our next discussion information item this evening relates to the East High School alternative. Our alternative school is here with members of their staff to present an update on things happening within their specific school. So I want to welcome Susan Poppy, the East High School principal, and also Luke Pinion, our Director of Student Services. Welcome, and thank you both for being here tonight.
Thank you for having us. Really proud to have Susan Poppy here as the new principal this year at East Alternative High School. She won't brag about herself, so I'll brag a little bit about her for her. She's coming to us with 30 years of experience in alternative education and special education, so she's been a really good addition over to East as the principal this school year. We're here today to talk about a few updates specific to East Alternative. I wanted to just kind of ground us in the charter. So we have the charter contract that was approved between the School District of Waukesha and East back in 2018. It will come due again in 2023. That charter contract does waive certain policies and statutes in terms of providing alternative education to students who are identified as at-risk, and that at-risk identification is for graduation status. Those waivers include the graduation standards and requirements, days and hours of instruction, curriculum and instruction materials, as well as attendance. We'll get into a little bit more detail about what that looks like in practice, but I just wanted to remind kind of the main pieces of that charter that are in there. And then it goes into the programs as well, spelled out in the charter contract, which Susan's going to talk about as well.
Okay, within our charter, we do have a governance board. That is pretty much your school board in that right now, but we would like to expand it to inviting our parents and student representatives as well. So that's on the docket, hopefully starting the next school year, is just to truly make a true governance board. This fall, when I first started, I met with our teachers and they wanted some input into what is our mission and our vision of East. So as we look at going forward, they came together and looked at us as a community. East has many programs under it, so it's kind of like the umbrella, but everybody wanted to be one school. So that includes not only our competency credit alternative east side of the school, but we include our Waukesha Transition Academy in there as well as our middle school. So as a team, our teachers came up with this. They looked at, like I said, the student perspective and our teachers, because we are all learners. So I'll give you a moment to read that. From that, we were developing our vision statement. This is just some key points out of it. The vision is longer than that, but basically it's going to come down to what we want our students to know. We want them to have integrity, we want them to have grit or perseverance, and we want them to achieve excellence. How do we get there? Making that happen is through our student learning, celebration, our diverse learning community. We have learners from all walks of the community, from all grade levels, from all socioeconomic, racial, you name it, we take them all. We want to provide a rigorous and relevant curriculum, which we'll get into a little bit more. We're focusing more on what we call deeper learning. We can get in a little bit more of that. Flexibility in our real world connections and how our students become more lifelong learners. So at Waukesha East, we do provide a lot of services, I guess you would say. Our curriculum, again, we want to provide the challenging and engaging curriculum. We want to develop our kids to think critically. They do not need to Google an answer. They need to learn to process and actually critically think. Connect school experiences to our future expectations and expose them to those wide variety of career and educational opportunities. They all have the promise to become either doctors, military, the whole kit and caboodle. They are not limited because of the word alternative. No offense, I do not like that word. Full disclosure. So anyways, we are also going to promote perseverance in our productivity, and we're going to start building those. Actually, we've already started building bridges between our schools, our families, our communities. We have community partnerships already starting, graduating our students who are prepared to work in our global society. We do have a very small student-teacher ratio. I would say we do not go over 12:1. Some cases we do. It just depends on who needs what at that moment. We have our specially trained educators. Every one of our teachers hold either or both an alternative education license and a special education license. They have a personalized curriculum instruction designed to their individual needs. So we're going to meet those students where they're at. What do we need to do to fill in the gaps to make them college and career ready? We do focus heavily on character development, mindfulness, and study skills. A lot of them come in with some baggage, not a lie. We all have baggage, especially in this day and age. And they're learning to be better, productive citizens. They have direct support through all levels, both personal, emotional, and social. And then opportunities for our project-based learning, experiential learning, team building, mentoring, and service learning. So now you're going to see this East revisioning and wanting to know, oh, what's that? When I came on in fall, my vision was how do we get our students to graduate? These are our disengaged students, these are our disillusioned students, so what do we need to do? My belief is if we can get our kids engaged, they're gonna come to school. If they're gonna come to school, they're gonna learn, and if they're learning, they're gonna graduate, which then makes us raise our graduation rate and hopefully get off the school improvement plan from the DPI. That is the ultimate goal. So how do we get there? So we got to stop thinking just in that traditional learning box a little bit. And so we are reaching out to do relevant hands-on curriculum through project-based learning and deeper learning tactics, I guess you would say. And we are restructuring our school to meet those more hands-on and relevant inquiry-based model for them to start delving deeper. By doing that, we know our students have many pathways open to them. They will have the college pathway, be it the 4-year. They will have a career pathway. They are welcome, obviously, for the 2-year pathway, the military. Nothing has been taken off the table with our revisioning plan because we want them to excel to the best of their ability. So I know you get the report probably once a year on what is an at-risk kid.
We approve it every year.
Yes. In a nutshell, these are our disengaged and disenfranchised kiddos. They may have attendance issues, they may have trauma. I mean, these are our kids. We just take them where they are at. They are credit deficient. Some are not credit deficient, but they can't handle the large school environment. They're just, I call them square pegs and round holes sometimes, you know. How do we reach those kids that are sometimes, they're just like, I don't mean this disrespectfully, how do I play that game of school? Because some kids just don't fit that traditional pathway. We have to reach them where they are at. You good? Mm-hmm. Okay. So we have currently 6 pathways to success, and like I said, we have all 6 programs under our one umbrella. We have our credit program, which are your students that are on track meeting graduation requirements through the, I think Waukesha has the 25 credit. We have our competency program, which is for students that are in 12th grade that are significantly credit deficient, and then they are trying to meet the essential elements, the priority standards that they need in the reading, math, social studies, and science. Our GEDO, our GED Option 2 program, are for seniors that actually have to test in and test out. They use the GED as a measurement tool, but it is a traditional high school diploma that actually, once they pass that, they are college and career ready. They're quite smart. Our WTA is our Waukesha Transition Academy. They're under our umbrella as well, and we meet their needs also in the community. We call them our Junior Phoenixes. That is our middle school program. We have about 6 middle schoolers in our school that we are working again on character and academic skills, and then our Abeyance program. So those are our programs that do fall under our Waukesha East umbrella. The career pathways, like I said earlier, we have our apprenticeships, we have internships, on-the-job training, the Job Corps, military, and that school to work. All those options are available, and many of our students are starting to take advantage of that. All right. So, currently in the state of Wisconsin, graduation requirements are actually only 15. Students are required to have those 4 credits of English, math, 3 credits of math, 3 credits of science, 3 credits of social studies, 1.5 of gym, and then the 0.5 of health. They also need to pass the civics exam. So those are outlined by DPI. At Waukesha East, what we want to move to in our new model is what we call a 17 credit diploma. However, you're thinking, oh my gosh, the graduation requirements are 25 for Waukesha, so I'll explain what that means. We have, again, the 4 credits of English, 3 of math, 3 of science, 3 of social studies, 1.5 of gym, 0.5 of health, and actually a 0.5 of financial lit. We want our kids to understand money and how that works. Basically, if you're looking at that, you're knocking off a bunch of electives. As we start delving into our deeper learning model, our project-based model, the way that works is those electives are naturally built in to the program that the students are doing. So even though they're not getting a credited grade for that, it's actually merged and melded into the actual learning that they do on a daily basis. Again, with this model, there are other requirements. They have to be at least 17 and a half years old. It's not going to be, oh, 17 credits, you're 16, see you later. We have individual pathways for our students and career plans. So they will have to develop, what is my secondary plan? They have to, and how do we get there? Could they be in Start College now? Are they going to an apprenticeship? Are they doing a hybrid model between both? Options are actually endless. We want to keep forming those partnerships with the community, with WCTC, actually getting them hopefully to come in and teach some classes in the building and have our kids actually leave with a marketable skill. Except for, again, it's under that bigger, broader, project-based model. So the why, the big thing is we need to reduce our dropout rate and raise our graduation rate. A lot of those kids, when they come in and they are 4 credits and they're a junior or a senior in high school and they see 25, they're done, they're checked out. So how do we meet them where they are at and get them where their goal is? A lot of it is knowing your kid. What are their goals? So in order to do that, we're going to sit down and plan out, like I said, their individual thing, their individual pathway, and then losing my train of thought. Plan their career pathway and to get them on that goal. It also allows us to have those plans targeted to that specific goal, so those classes and those electives, if you would call it, but as we will call project-based, they're going to be very much so hands-on and really immersed in that type of learning so that they're ready to take that next step. The other very good thing about the 17 credits is we can now identify our at-risk students earlier and hopefully get them on that pathway so that by their senior year at 17, 18, now they're already experiencing maybe a college class here, or maybe they're talking with the military, or maybe they'll go to boot camp over between junior and senior year. There's just a lot of different pathways using this model.
I'd like to add too, another benefit is that we would be reducing the number of students that require competency programming, resulting in a competency diploma, which carries more significance and can affect them down the road post-secondary. So it would serve to kind of reduce the number, which has been increasing as well in competency.
And then the other change that we are making is almost like earn as you go. Each class, if it's worth 1 credit, every quarter they can earn a quarter credit. So if they come in and they blew their first quarter of school, that doesn't mean you've now lost an entire semester, because we're going to meet them for that second semester, and as they earn that, we just move forward from there, but they still have to meet the same pathways for the academics. And those are some of our kids. And I don't know if you have any questions, so.
Questions from the committee?
I'll just make.
Mr. Baum.
I'll make a comment or two because I've been watching our program in this area for a lot of years, and this is probably the most defined one I've seen. So I appreciate that. And, the work that's being done over there, I'm one of the few people here that can compare it to when you were over at the Harvey Phillips building. I don't know who else can remember that, but there's a big change, all positive, in what's happened over there, and I appreciate that, and I think the kids don't even know it, but they should appreciate it. And it used to be a behavior only, and you have opened the door on some of the other issues, not maybe alone, but some of the other issues that have happened now or are happening at East High School are additions that never existed before, kids that were not attended to before. And now that's happening, and I can say nothing but thank you for that, because this is an area that will exist no matter what, and we have to tend to it. And I think the way you've laid it out is encouraging, so that's my opinion. Thank you.
No, thank you. Have a great team.
Yeah. Anything else? Dr. Piazza.
Just a brief comment. I really appreciate the strategic thought that went into this, as well as, in terms of the additional credits, taking into consideration that students are leaving our care prepared to be successful. I think that's really important. So it's not just about time, it's about really meaningful experience. So I do appreciate that. Thank you.
Anything else?
And just thank you very much for, all the work you've done in a short period of time. It hasn't been that long.
So 30 years of experience here, Scott.
I know.
No sleep.
Yeah, that's
a lot of
probably-
tea. She drinks a lot of
I
tea.
drink a lot of
That's-
tea. Thank you.
But I don't think I've ever had such an extensive overview of the program. I now have a better understanding. And I really see that your approach is meeting the kids' needs instead of the kids meeting your needs. That's just in a nutshell how I summed it up based on everything I was seeing. And that's really what has to happen. Building that relationship and getting their buy-in and getting their attitudes towards school turned around and controlling behavior. And I love the idea of the quarter credit. I mean, that's a reward. I mean, that's an immediate reward and acknowledgement of their hard work and extra effort. So,
I have another question.
yes. Mr. Baumgart.
Yes, and you mentioned in there, I just want to ask, WCTC, have you made connections with them, or do you need help?
We've started. Molly?
Yep.
I'm working with Molly
Oh,
too.
nice.
My big vision
Awesome.
now is
Awesome.
to get that actually into the building.
Awesome.
Oh, yeah.
We're
And-
reaching out. We have a partnership with the Money Coach program right now that our students are, they're spokespersons for right
Okay.
now, and so
Because some of us know some people.
I'll call you. I might need an introduction. They came to one of our, we had a fair.
Oh,
They
good.
came to that, so I met a nice man there that wants to,
Good.
we're starting to partner, so hopefully by fall we'll have a lot more going.
Right. And Susan, I have one final question. We, every board meeting, we hear updates from either north, south, or west. And I'm not saying it has to be, every month, but, because they're on a rotational basis as well. Just to maybe put some thought into the fact that maybe someone from east could come and talk to us sometime and just share some of their ideas, because the other 3 high schools in this district are represented on a rotating basis. And I would welcome any of your students to come and to tell us the highlights of things that are going on in their school.
I
So,
appreciate that. I have
Yeah.
a good crew, they would.
yeah.
Thank
So
you.
whatever it takes to get on that rotation, I'm not sure, but,
Yeah,
okay.
I know someone I can.
because I think it would be so awesome. I mean, for those kids to be here and sharing their successes and be great for their families and
We've got,
very positive.
they're a good bunch.
Yeah.
They really are.
Yeah, and it shows in what you're portraying tonight and the work that you do. So I thank you very much for everything, and I know you're getting support from Luke and his team and everyone else, Dr. Cook, and it's really making a difference. So thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Next this evening, we have an update on high school scheduling. We have Rachel Herman, our Director of Secondary Learning, and she has a team that she'll be introducing. And then we look forward to your overview and presentation this evening, so welcome to all of you.
Hi, thank you for having us here tonight. So I'm gonna go and play. All right, so I am here tonight with 3 of our amazing secondary leaders. I have Kevin Kitzler, principal of Waukesha South High School, Ryan Patt, principal of West, I don't know why I'm saying West High School, like you guys know, right, West, and Brian Schley, athletic director at Waukesha North. And so over the course of the fall semester, all 3 of these men, in addition to several other district administrators, building administrators, teachers, and instructional coaches, came together to take a look at our high school schedule. Over the course of the pandemic, we had to make some adjustments to our high school schedule, including the 1-hour lunch, the start time. We had to use some of that time to do screeners, some of that other mitigation that was put into place. And so some of those changes carried into this upcoming school year. And as we were planning for the 22-23 school year, we thought it was important to take a step back and reevaluate where we were at and what we needed to continue to potentially shift to serve all of our students. And so that team came up with a recommendation for some revision to that schedule, and they're going to talk to you about what we've landed on and what was rolled out to our staff and to our families this past week.
Great. Thank you again, Brian from North High School. And what you see on the screen is just our current high school schedule. You can see that there are some pieces, as Rachel said, that were put into place based on COVID mitigation that were carried over. The decision at that time, we were still in a little bit of uncertainty, and so it made sense to have some things in place just in case. But now moving forward, we'd like to make that update. And so you see the check-in from 7:20 to 7:50 was on there. The longer lunch period with more students leaving during that time and having some spaces to spread out within the building if they choose to. And so what that has happened with some of that time with not necessarily needing all the mitigation strategies in place, we've had some teachers doing some extra work with students in that 7:20 to 7:50 time, having some hours in their room where they can take students in. And so looking ahead to next year, which is the revised schedule, we're looking at again having a common start time. In the past, prior to the COVID schedule, we had a school start time of 7:35. We had an academic options period there. A lot of the feedback from our teachers was that at the beginning of the day it was hard to get buy-in from students to attend during that time. And so we also had a different start time for different students based on whether they were in some interventions during that time or not, which caused some confusion. So we have a common start time of 7:35 every day. We also then have built in 2 lunch periods, and what a student would have is lunch during one period, and then the opposite period they would have their homeroom. And we have a plan that we're working through and continuing to build forward on having students do 1 day a week working on their academic and career planning, which they're already doing in homeroom, a day where we can implement some social emotional curriculum at the high school level, and then planning 3 days where they would have the opportunity through what's called a flex scheduler to meet with teachers and get additional support academically during the school day. So that is the basis of what's laid out on the schedule in front of you.
The rationale for revisions, first bullet point, is really creating and implementing a clear homeroom structure to support remediation, growth, organization, and overall study skills. It'll be beneficial to student achievement. And that's putting all of those things together, as Brian talked about, during a common time during the school day. Academic support for students is built into the day. Sorry, I went ahead. It's built into the day, ensuring that all students have access to teachers at this time. So obviously our buses are arriving. Previously when that happened, students didn't always go to where we wanted them to go to get some of those needed remediation or supports. And with this being during the day, that's a good positive rationale change.
Also having homeroom every day, we're able to have the character strong curriculum once a week, and we can also do the academic career planning once a week. So as Brian mentioned, we would look at doing Mondays the academic and career planning, Tuesday do the character strong curriculum aspect, and then the other 3 days we would have that just in time built in there within the homeroom time. We also have method test prep that we could utilize during that time, which is an ACT test prep program. We also, with the new schedule, we eliminate the A's and the B's. So before we had like a 5A, 5B, 6A, 6B, so it just helps with less complex and offer more opportunities for students by not having those overlapping classes. Also within there, we would have a common planning time. So by eliminating the 6A, 6B, and the 5A, 5B, that also supports having our teachers being able to have a time common where they would be able to collaborate within the school day. So that also supports that. And then just as Brian mentioned, we just have a consistent time that we'd be starting at 7:35 every day.
So I think it was 3 years ago, we had 7:35 on Mondays, and then Tuesday through Fridays, we had that just in time in the morning. So then it was, the other students that weren't during that time would then have a later start date. So this is just a consistent time for all families and students to arrive. And then on this past week, January 24th, we talked to the staff just similar to what we had just shared with you. So we communicated what the new schedule will look like, along with some of the meeting times that we would have built in throughout the school year. Family communication was also sent out later in that day. So after we presented it with the staff, had time to kind of talk to the staff through some of the questions that they had. Then the communication was sent out to all the families and students. And then we continue to get feedback. So if they have questions around what the schedule will look like, what the common planning will look like, we've continued to have meetings throughout. We had a scheduling meeting today, so we had opportunities for staff to ask questions around it. We had a SAIL team meeting earlier, so we've continued to provide opportunities for staff if they have any questions around it as well. And then, of course, as the family communication went out, if there's any questions from families, we've been answering those as well to kind of clarify around the new schedule.
Questions that you have for our team?
Mr. Baumgart.
Certainly it'll eliminate some of the confusion, there's no question about that. I remember the torture that we were going through years ago when we were trying to plan this. And I didn't do the math, but I'm going to ask the question quite simply. In the new array here of times, do we have the same minutes of classroom time?
We have increased the number of instructional time from this current school year to next school year that we will be seeing.
So actually, in giving them more time.
Correct, with that start time especially.
That's a positive, right there. Thank you.
Dr. Piazza.
Thank you. Can you clarify that? The time is going into homeroom, is that correct?
So I'm clarifying in that 7:35 when we put in that mitigation, that 7:35 time, we were using that for temp screeners, if you remember.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was not instructional time. And so now that time with a first hour start time is instructional time. So that's where I would say we're no longer using that time for mitigation, it's being used for instruction. The start and end time did not change, it's just what we're using the time for that's changing.
Can I just clarify that too? Because I understand that the start time technically didn't change, but kind of it changed, right? Because students will expect it to be in a class at 7:35, where currently they're not expected to be in a class until 7:55.
Correct.
What's the feedback been like from parents and students?
Great question. I'll have the principals talk first about what they've heard, and then I'll speak.
I haven't gotten anything specifically from parents or students, so I don't have any feedback specifically from them at this time. So I'm meeting with my parent committee coming up here, but I haven't had any individual feedback yet.
Okay.
And I've had one parent reach out, and we just kind of clarified some of the questions that they had, but that was the only question that I've had so far.
They must all be calling me, I don't know what's going on.
Most of that feedback likely went to Kristen, so I can't really speak for her right at this moment.
Some of the feedback that I've heard, first, is that there is a logistical consideration for families with middle school students who have high school students who are actually dropping off their middle school students. And so that creates some problems for some families. We're still piloting the Character Strong, right? We're not full into that. Different topic, but I do think that we need to provide a lot more transparency to families about what's in that program and what students will actually be experiencing in that day of the week that they're doing that in the homeroom. And then the other feedback that I've heard, and I think this is something that particularly people like at West, is that the longer lunch period is allowing students to do clubs during the day, and that's also helping with students who are otherwise in sports or who take buses or who carpool with other kids. So those are things that obviously are preferences and not necessarily in consideration of access to classes and those sorts of things. But I think logistically, I am actually surprised that you haven't received more feedback, and maybe that's coming, or I just get to be the messenger.
Yeah, no, I'll share this because I've received a few communications. I usually push them right back to the building principals because they're very capable of answering them. I would say the number one parent question I've received, and again, it's under like 5 that I've received, has been the logistical one about the same start time. And we've just talked about when those buildings open their doors, and so it's usually a 5-minute apart drop off, and so those buildings thankfully are pretty close together, and so dropping off one versus the other, you can drop off a high school student far earlier than you can drop off the middle school student, so just kind of working through those logistics seems to have we've been able to quell those parents' concerns. In terms of the social and emotional piece, we do have all of the principals meeting with, they have homeroom captains, and so those groups are meeting over the month of February. We will be reconvening at the end of February and into March to talk about really the specifics around that homeroom structure, and when and if that character strong curriculum is recommended and adopted by the board, we would be developing a scope and sequence. We would be developing how that is going to be implemented, and that would be shared with not only the board, but with all of our teachers, and could be made visible for any parent who would want access to that. So I think that those two pieces are reasonable. The lunch piece, I haven't heard any concern around. I don't know if you guys have heard concerns around that, but that has not come up on my.
I think it was more the duration of the lunch, right? Because if upperclassmen have open campus for lunch, but 30 minutes for lunch, it really does limit their ability to take advantage of that.
Yeah, and that's what it's been every other year in the past. This is really the first year since COVID that we've ever had this extended lunch. So we've had release in the past with the 30-minute lunch. So do you guys want to speak to that, if that's been problematic before?
Students adjust. They figure it out, so whether they bring cold lunch more often, or they know exactly how long it takes them to get to where they need to get. For us, specifically at West, we're pretty far away from Sunset, so it's a little bit of a drive, but they've always managed it well, and I expect them to continue to do it well. So
Yeah, it's not the worst thing to keep them closer to the building either, but just, some of the feedback. And then, so the time that's been added essentially is to create the homeroom.
The time that's been added is essentially to create the homeroom. Yes, there's a homeroom structure every day.
Have we ever had homerooms before for high school? Yeah.
yes, only on the Monday schedule.
Just the Monday, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So that's,
I think if you look at it as what has been happening in the morning as that academic support time, right? It was, they talked a little bit about it was required for some students to attend. Some teachers were assigning students to attend, and that has been a continuous barrier. And what we have done is we're building that time now into the school day when we already have students in our buildings. And so that 3 days a week, that Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we still haven't nailed down all of the logistics, but the idea is that those 3 days, that's not necessarily teacher in front of kids doing a homeroom structure. That is intended to be that academic support time that had been in the mornings. Only now it's in the school day when we have students in our buildings. Because historically, we have found that morning time just has not served our students well to receive that academic support. And with achievement being what it is right now, we need to do something different to help to address those gaps.
and I assume the end time is designed around elementary school busing. Is that right? Do we share buses between high school and elementary school?
Yeah, busing does put parameters around both the elementary and the secondary level. We do the two-tiered route where you pick up the high school kids first in the morning, drop them off at school, then run the route to do the elementary, and then vice versa in the afternoon.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I'm good.
Okay. Will you be back at all? To,
We probably not, but in the Friday board packets, we can most certainly include any updates should they transpire.
Looks like you put a lot of thought into this and really tried to do.
It was a comprehensive team. Like I said, we had a lot of team members who contributed to this discussion. It was not something that was done quickly. It was, we started meeting, I think, in September and met on a monthly basis. So a lot of time and feedback went into the changes that were made.
Did you have staff involvement too?
We did.
And what's been the feedback from them in general?
In general, I think very positive. We're having a lot of conversations with staff around, I haven't had any conversations with staff around the actual logistics of the schedule. I think that's been pretty well received. I think it's more around just the implementation of what is, again, that homeroom going to look like, how is that going to work, how do I get my students, so just some of those logistics that we're still trying to hammer out.
And I have no doubt that you will be able to do that. So, good. Thank you very much for the presentation tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And for getting us up to speed on high school scheduling. Thank you very much.
I'm coming right back. I know
Next this evening, we were going to have a family engagement update related to the area of special education. However, one of our presenters is unable to be here tonight, so we will be tabling that discussion information item until next month. Okay. Our last discussion information item tonight relates to the library book process and the classroom libraries inventory. We have Jody Landish, Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, Rachel Herman, Director of our Secondary Learning, and we have Melina Kopleen, a Library Media Specialist. And we also have Mr. Zenobia, one of our school board members who will be joining us tonight. They told me you were presenting, Mr. Zenobia.
Yes, so, yeah, not to be confused with our presenters, but we do want to have him available to ask questions of the team too. So we kind of have a two-part series in this update. The first really talks about just where we are with the processes, right? The parent notification systems, and then Rachel's going to go a little bit into the inventory. As mentioned earlier this evening, the process of the classroom libraries, right? So this is twofold. One has to do with the big media centers or the libraries that we think about in each of our schools. And then the second part of the presentation is the actual classroom libraries that exist across the schools. So thanks for being here tonight.
That's good.
All right, so we want to start tonight just reviewing the selection process for our school libraries. And so we are required by our school policy to establish guidelines that our library and media specialists follow in order to choose the selection of books. And so they follow that policy, and they also have a library media specialist services handbook that goes into great detail over those procedures. So a question that's asked is our process working? And so I wanted to give some information around what is happening. So our total collection versus the number of books that have come up as a concern is less than 0.5%. So when you look at our total books that are in our libraries, and that's individual titles, versus the amount of books that have come up as concern is a low percent. Then our number of books that are of that concern and books that have either been moved, let's say that they were at a middle school library, we reviewed those and moved them up either to high school or might have moved them out, no matter the level, is about 5% of those books that we were charged with to relook at as a concern. So they had already been removed, didn't have them, or were adjusted to where they were at. Our selection policy, so our board policy, and our manual is based off of the national standards for school libraries. And our libraries school libraries. We believe those are a place of choice, and our goal is to have a collection that meets the diverse needs and interests of each and every child. And so, as stated tonight, our libraries should reflect interest in every direction, making sure that all people are represented and that it's not one-sided in any type of way. And so that is something that we work towards in our selection of materials. We do have a state statute that gives direction to what school boards need to do with the library facilities. And so we are required to make sure that we have books that are current, that are balanced in collection, and our reference materials, text, periodicals, audio-visual as well, and that they depict an accurate and unbiased way, that they reflect cultural diversity, and that's of all varying people, and pluralistic in nature of the American society. So making sure that all people are represented, all sides, perspectives are there and present for everyone to learn from and enjoy. And Waukesha Board has approved policies that we are using, and these procedures have been working well for us and actually helped us this year when concerns of books were brought to us. We were able to use our processes to make decisions around those books of concern. The next is the parent notification process. So when concerns were brought up, the district looked at what was another layer that we could put in place, and that came into play that a notification would go home to every parent every night, and that was for students 4K through 9. Parents did have the opportunity to opt out, so they would not get the notification, but even if you opt out of not getting the notification, a parent anytime can go in and see what their student has checked out or currently has checked out. So that's something that everyone can do at any time. We do believe that parents are best at knowing what is the most appropriate choice for their student based on their family values and what they're wanting to talk with their children about. So parents can work with teachers and library staff in helping to reinforce those choices that they have. And since we put in those notification processes that have been going out, we asked each of our library media specialists if they have had any concerns brought to them from their library staff or to them directly about a book that's being checked out from the district, and we have not had any since that process went into place. Might want to note that there is a reason why that notification only goes through 9th grade and not all the way through 12th grade, and that is because of Act 207 from the Wisconsin State Statute that speaks to the age of students of which you have to notify. So we had to follow that state statute, and that's why you don't see that for our students in grades 10, 11, and 12.
So I'm Elena Kopleen. I'm one of the 5 professional media specialists working in the district. Some questions have come up about the funding for where do we get money for books, and so it's really important that you understand where that comes from. So almost everything that we have in the in the school libraries, is paid through common school funds. And the common school funds were established as part of the Wisconsin Constitution in 1848 and has been with us ever since, as far as I know. Basically, money that is collected by in public lands, primarily in logging, as well as some fines and fees, is put into investment, and roughly about 1% of the interest on that investment comes back to every school in the state of Wisconsin in the form of the Common School Fund. It's managed by the Board of Commissioners of Public Lands, the State Treasurer, the Secretary of State, and the Attorney General of Wisconsin. And as of last year, it was about $32 or $33, although the new numbers for 21-22 just came out, and it is currently up to $35 per student. So our library media specialist, the picture that was on the page before, I'm sorry. Every year for the past several years, those government entities, the state treasurer, secretary of state, the people from the commissioners of public lands, have come to the state library and technology conference called WEMTA and presented ceremoniously the Common School Funds check. And that's the picture of the last in-person meeting that we had. So in terms of purchasing, library media personnel by state statute are coordinators of the budget for the Common School Funds. The way we do it here in Waukesha is we pull out the amounts needed for district expenses. So what that means is, and it's roughly about 50% of the Common School Fund, goes to our databases. Now, for those of you of a certain age like me and older, we didn't have databases. We had a reference section, right? We had encyclopedias, we had atlases, we had almanacs. Those are very expensive. They are very difficult to keep current. And so that's one of the reasons that we have moved, obviously, to databases. It's just more efficient. So once we take the database money off the top, and yes, we have databases at every level, including primary grades. The rest of the funds then are dispersed between the schools, and we have a formula for that takes into effect our bilingual schools who actually get extra funding because in essence they are creating two separate libraries, one in English and one in Spanish, and also schools with higher needs because of things getting lost or not returned to the library. So then each librarian manages their purchases at the schools they're responsible for. As with most government money, there's strings attached. So basically we can buy library books. We can buy instructional materials for the school library, and that is specifically attached to the library media specialist as an educator. So anything that we would use to teach about library skills could be purchased with those funds. And then also school library computers. Again, due to what it says in the state statutes, they are for the school library media program. And as I said before, all purchases using Common School Funds are made after consultation with a DPI licensed media specialist. So these are our numbers going back several years. And like I said, it's roughly, well, it had been about $32 to $33 per student. This is different than the school funding that we get from the state because the students don't necessarily have to attend here. It is a census that's taken of students ages 4 through 20 who reside in the district. They don't necessarily have to attend. So those are our numbers, and in 1920, additional funds from the state came through the Common School Funds, and those are reflected on this graph as well. Do you have any questions for me regarding the Common School Fund? All right. We just threw this slide in here. Oh, sorry, Bill.
Would you go back to that, how they count the kids? I mean, they don't have to be students at ours, they could be students.
My understanding, and I don't know, if Joe Cook is still here, he may be able to, but there's a census that we have to fill out that says how many students are in the district, in the neighborhoods, but not necessarily, they reside in the district, but they don't attend.
Yeah, we have a pupil count of all the kids,
Yeah.
school-age kids who live in our district boundaries, and that then is reported up to the state.
Right.
Okay.
So it's a different formula than is used for other school funding.
Yeah, I'll say it is.
Melena, with Common School Funds, can they be rolled over from year to year?
We've never done it in the past, but we had to do it in the last few years. The reason we've had to do it is because any of you who work in any kind of procurement know the last several years have been brutal in terms of ordering. what we were facing, obviously, all our ordering shut down when the closure happened. So essentially, our ordering time was not quite cut in half, maybe cut slightly less than that, but all ordering stopped. So then those monies rolled over. For 2021, and also now in this year, we would submit orders for books and maybe receive a half to a third of what we requested. There are some orders that I actually resubmitted 3 times before I got just about everything I wanted on the order. So, because of the, you have to wait to see if it's gonna come or not, otherwise you're gonna double order on stuff. We've had to roll over because our time limit runs out.
Right. So it's always been possible to roll over.
My understanding is, I guess I didn't think it was, but my understanding is it may be. That might be a question that we'd have to ask DPI to be certain.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Just one more clarifying question is our iPad-based library included, the cost of that included?
Sora, are you talking about Overdrive? Yes.
That comes
I can tell you that Sora the books that we purchase to put into the Sora library works out to about 5% of the total Common School Fund. And the thing about ebooks is that it really is dependent on the publisher, how we get to own those. A physical book, we basically just go and buy and bring in, and it's ours until it falls apart. Ebooks don't work that way. They can work that way. Some publishers allow us to do that. We purchase it, we keep it forever. Most of what we purchased is essentially leased for 12 months to up to 36 months. And so it's almost like a subscription.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, all right. So I'm gonna kind of switch gears and talk about, I'll give you an update around our classroom book inventories and how that work is progressing. So we are excited that we have completed the inventory at West, South, North, and I am really sorry, this should have been switched to Les Paul. And STEM is currently underway. That work was extensive. It was an incredible process. We thought that this was going to be something that was like, I don't want to say dit work, but right, like book, scan. And it was a little bit more extensive than that. We are on track to complete all of our middle schools before the end of February. What will be happening is teachers are going to upload their classroom libraries onto their Blackboard courses by the end of February. That's our timeline. Right now, what we have is a massive, and by massive, I mean massive spreadsheet of every book in our secondary system that we have inventoried, attached to every classroom teacher, attached to every classroom, and we have just started the process of uploading that spreadsheet onto BookSource, which is what we presented to you back in the fall. That's the platform that we're using to do the actual audit of our classroom libraries. And so we've just started that with some of our schools, but again, it's a pretty intensive process that we're using our tech department to help us to complete. And so once that's done, we can manipulate that massive spreadsheet that we're using to complete the inventory to allow teachers to upload their individual pages to that Blackboard, to their Blackboard courses, where it would then be visible to parents. The reason that we went that route versus just updating them right to BookSource is from a management perspective. We wanted something that year to year we could continue to update, and this spreadsheet and working with our tech department to do that in-house allowed us that capability versus we hire a new teacher, now we have to get a new teacher's login into BookSource and manage it through a third party, which we just didn't want to have to do. Some overarching themes that we have taken so far from our secondary inventory. We've run, like I said, a few of our schools through BookSource. Right now, what we have found is not really that surprising. It's kind of what we predicted what we were going to find. One is we need to increase the level of nonfiction that's available to our students in our secondary schools. So when they get to high school, the National Council of Teachers of English really recommends a 50-50 fiction to nonfiction reading diet for students. And in our classroom libraries, what we are finding in the ones that we have run through this audit process is that they are predominantly fiction titles. And so we really want to look at increasing our nonfiction availability. We have found that we have classroom libraries where there are 500 books, and we have found that there are classroom libraries where there are 20 books. And so the balance of books that are provided from classroom to classroom has varied greatly. And again, we were anticipating that. We have not, as a system at the secondary level, had a stance or an approach to either funding classroom libraries or building classroom libraries. And so right now, at the secondary level, right now, that process has really relied on, you know, teachers receiving donations, teachers writing grants, and so again, that span of differentiation between a teacher's classroom library from one to the next being so different was to be expected, and that's going to help us to plan our next steps in terms of what we need to plan to do differently as we head into next year. An area of celebration was that we did see when we, through our audit, in the ones that we've looked at so far, there are a variety of perspectives, a variety of narratives. However, we still need to continue to balance that area. So there's always room for growth, but the audit originally said that we've got some great perspectives and narratives that are offered in our classroom libraries. So we're anxious to continue the work. Our updated timeline is that if you look at kind of where we are right now, our goal, like I said, is that we're still done by the end of February with all of our secondary sites, and that those Blackboard courses, teachers will be able to upload their individual classroom library list by the end of February to their Blackboard courses. We would continue to take spring then to kind of plan around what did we find and what do we want our next steps to be at the secondary level. And then during the summer, it's going to be Melissa's turn to tackle 3 of our elementary sites. We're starting small. Like I said, this process has unveiled more about what we thought it was going to be. And so we're looking at tackling Prairie, Meadowbrook, and Hillcrest this summer as a starting point for the elementary classroom inventory. And then after that is, again, creating and implementing a plan of improvement, plan of action based on what they find at that level. And that's all we have for you.
Questions, comments?
That's big.
I'll start if I can.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Obviously, there's a lot of work that's gone into the classroom libraries, and I think we all appreciate that administration and teachers were willing to do this work. Just listening to Melissa, I think that 5% of a 0.5% still means there's books there, and I think that also means that they're harder to find, or that students are finding them and we don't know about them. And so I do appreciate that potentially there's a small number that raise concern. And when I say raise concern, I don't mean in terms of their views, but more about that tripping that line of obscenity and vulgarity that I think is where most of the concern is coming from. So I appreciate that there's a lot of effort to do this inventory to try to just wrap our arms around what we have. One of the things that I think just I wanted to ask more about that probably led to how some of these pieces became accessible to 6th, 7th graders is how we reconcile the reviews that we're receiving from clearinghouses, publishers, and what's actually in the books, because they don't, in the cases where we've run into trouble, they don't align. What are we doing from a review perspective to make sure that we understand the books that we're buying?
I'd like to speak to that I disagree with you that the reviews are from the publishers. The reviews we use are from professional review sources that specialize in working with schools, as well as, in some cases, public library. Now, every once in a while, there will be, well, like Publishers Weekly is one that is seen a lot. But I do think those are more professional. But we tend to focus on, our professional staff tends to focus on the reviews from the resources that specialize in reviewing for schools. And I agree that sometimes we don't always see the information that we'd like to see in that review, but I also believe that I see better reviews now than some of the older things that we had.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Just as a comment, I don't really care who wrote the review. I think if we're considering the review in our selection of a book, then we need to really believe that that review is fair. And I think, at least in the instances of those books that have had the most obscene content, the review in no way indicated that that content was in those books. So that's my concern, is if we're relying on reviews, I don't care who wrote them, how do we make sure that we're not going down this path?
I think the reviews, and Melina, correct me if I'm wrong, that's for some of these books, and I think the numbers, you referenced the 5%. 5% of the total library is what's been brought to our attention as a concern, but out of that 5%, correct me if I'm wrong, I want to go back, it was only, I'm sorry, 0.5% of the total library is what was brought to the concern, and out of that 0.5%, only 5% we changed. And if I looked at that total number, what that 5% means, I'm thinking we're talking about fewer than 20 books out of...
The 5% relates back to the roughly 100 books that we were asked to reevaluate. About 5% of those 100-ish books. So that relates to 5. Okay. 5 books.
So I share that because I think that in addition to the reviews, for some of these books, especially at the secondary level, that are causing some of that concern, that review is the first step, but it's not the last step. And the last time that our library specialist talked with us, they shared with our team, and I believe we reported out on this when we gave the last update, that they're looking at blogs. They're looking at what are the other critics saying about the books. They're looking at what are schools, Melina is connected to the librarian in Elmbrook, the librarian in Muskego. Do you have this book in your library? So that review is the first step, but it's not the last step, especially for books that come out as this is the new book, or this is, a book that's causing waves. We have librarians in our system, Margaret Attinen, she's listed here, and I was just in her library not too long ago where she had, without anybody telling her to do so, taken a book and was reviewing it just based on some information that she had been shared through a library forum that she had been a part of. So I do think that when I think about that number, that we're talking about fewer than 10 books out of a 336,000 inventory, I think we do need to remember that, again, that process is working and that review isn't the only step. It's not the end-all be-all, that there's a lot more that goes into it. And we might have something that slips through the cracks, but when that has happened, we move swiftly and urgently on every one of those concerns. Within a week timeline, and sometimes within days, when that concern is brought to our attention, our team convenes, we put readers on it, we make that determination, and we follow up with the person that brought us the concern. It's taken very seriously because there's always going to be room for that human error.
The other thing you need to know is that once those books come to school, we get that order and we've got that shelf of books out, I'm the first person who looks at those books, or sometimes my aide is because they're unpacking them. And the review process continues there. I can't tell you how many books I've taken off the shelf and said, I want to read this. I'm a little bit worried about this. I want to make sure this is a good fit for this school. So, like I said, it doesn't just stop at the before purchase. We are self-reviewing our choices as soon as the book is in our physical premises.
I mean, yeah, I actually, let me be careful what I say here. I appreciate everything that you guys are doing to wrap our arms around these books. I really, really do. And I want to be very clear that this is not about content and opinions and, you know, political perspective, and nobody's trying to take literary works off the shelves. What I am really concerned about is, for example, Laura Miracle writes a beautiful series for kids, Upside Down Magic, right?
Love it.
My daughter loves it. I read it. It's fantastic. What is stopping a sixth grader who loves Laura Miracle's books from pulling Later Gator off the shelf or TTYL because there's emojis on the cover and it seems innocent enough? And as a parent, you see your sixth grader with a book with emojis on the cover and you don't think that there's content in there about statutory rape and sex and things that a lot of 10 and 11-year-old girls probably aren't prepared to read on their own. And that's the thing that, you know, these notifications are about. It's not about individual people's political opinions. It's about what's appropriate, age appropriate for the kids. So when I read the review on that book, I wouldn't have thought for a second that what's in that book is actually in that book. So I do appreciate that parents have a pathway to bring these books forward. I don't know necessarily that there's full agreement on the decisions that are made with various books, some that include content that is statutory rape that remains on our shelves. I think, you know, and I've read the case law, I've looked at what's happened in other states, I've looked at various positions on First Amendment, et cetera. I understand what the Wisconsin state statutes essentially allow school boards to have in their libraries without accountability to what would otherwise be felonies for providing those materials to kids, and that concerns me greatly because there's too much room to just ignore it. I'm not saying that we are. I actually, again, am saying that you guys took this seriously, and I know a lot of you read a lot of books in a very short period of time, and I appreciate that. I think there's still this, for example, the book Queer, I know, was the top recommended book on a lot of high school students' Sora apps for a period of time. They didn't understand why. How does that happen, that that's the top recommended book for so many high school students for a long period of time? The kids were talking about it way before the parents were talking about it. So how do we get through that to make sure that the content is, you know, really promoting love of reading and not necessarily obsession with the content?
I'm just going to let that lay there.
Yeah, I could just leave that out there.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate, right? I felt eyes on me like I needed to respond, but I appreciate that comment.
No, I think this is an ongoing, this is kind of a rhetorical question, but the best way to stop having to address whether or not we need to remove books is to make informed decision about whether those books belong in a learning environment.
And I think, again, I feel so confident in our processes. The policy has guided us well. I've had 2 or 3 other school districts, neighboring school districts, reach out to us to ask what we're doing and are in awe of the efforts that we have put together. I do want to say one thing we haven't said a lot about, but your comment about the process, and then I want to remind people that there's a consideration committee too. So to your point, Kelly, about, you know, some people perhaps haven't been happy with the decision, there is always that next step too. The policy says that we must provide a consideration committee, so that team is sort of waiting in the wings. There is a process to go through and appeal before that and try to, again, work it out with the parent if they're not happy with it. But we do, I believe, have the full continuum of the processes available for parents. And we'll continue to work with them and be transparent in the process, knowing that it's ever evolving and complex, so.
I do want to say that earlier when Ms. Keene was talking, I did take note that she said she got a notification today, but it gave her the title, but didn't provide more information, so I wrote that down to look in. Is that something that with notifications, more information on the book could be provided or not, so. To agree.
Mr. Zenobia.
Thank you, and thank you for giving me a chance to come and make some comments. I appreciate it, and I do appreciate all the work that's been done. It really has been a lot. I think what I, as a board member, and what a lot of parents are wondering right now is, how does all your work become more transparent to us? Because a lot of the questions that I have are, how do we see, for instance, the initial report, the initial books that you looked at, which was probably 100, and I think you found less than 100 titles in our libraries. How are those determinations made? We don't need to go through every aspect of that question tonight, but what was the process? How did you put it back through? Did the librarians revisit it? Did you revisit it as a team? How did you decide to leave some books where they were and move others?
I'll take a stab at this because I was in most of those meetings. We called them the team huddles. Some people made fun of it, but we would literally, I'm a sports person, so that's why I used the word huddle, right? So we huddled up when we got these requests coming our way. So to your point, Anthony, there were several, which was good for us, that weren't even in our inventory. So that helped quite a bit, kind of knock the list down. But one by one, we would meet as a team. We would go through and the administrators would sit with them and say, what would you normally do if this process came to you as a school librarian? And so what they would do is get all the librarians together, look at the scholarly reviews that they had reviewed, and then we would always put 3 readers on the process as well. So when Kelly mentioned, we were reading books, we were taking books home that night and the weekend to reread them if they hadn't. But as an administrator from the outside looking in, I was actually shocked at how many books our librarians have read themselves. There were several of the books were I read it. And so we had already had 3 reviewers. There were probably only a handful where the 5 or 8 of us were well, only one person read it. Well, we need 2 more to read it. So I don't know if you want to add anything, but those are the things that stuck out to me in terms of the process.
Yeah, and I would just add, we really took it back through the original process of how you would bring the book in the first place. And there were some, I can think of one example, and Melina can probably remember it, where one book was brought to our attention, and I immediately said, it's gone. It's gone. And just on the reviews, and they all pushed back immediately, Rachel, we can't, right? That's not our process. That's not the only thing we do. So now we have to put readers on it, and then we do this. And it was such an intricate discussion around these books, because when you start to talk about, right, making that determination, that's something that they take very seriously. And it was thoughtful discussion each time we came together. In some cases, because some of the books that were brought to our attention were also part of our, in some cases, curricular areas. We talked to teachers about them. We sought their feedback. So it was to Jody's point, it was a very intense process that was taken very seriously each time a book was brought to our attention.
So of all those books that were looked at from that initial list, say 50, 75 roughly a decision was made on those books. Can we see at some point how many remain, how many were moved, what actual books were?
Yeah, I've given you that in a board update, but I can give it to you again.
With the titles?
Did I give you titles? I did not give you titles, but I can give you that as a board.
You did give us the books that were moved, the books that stayed, the books that were, I did see that.
Yeah.
I guess my question then is, given any
title on there, why weren't they all moved to the 16 age level, given what was on just that list? So that would be my question, so we can see what was that process, how those decisions were made, and why some books remained at. Maybe the process is still flawed. And by that I mean, we have a number of books, and I see the number of 336,000 books, but we didn't try to, you did not try to audit any books outside of that initial list.
Not me, I think our librarians have throughout, basically since September. There's no doubt, I mean, Mrs. Herman just described something that Margaret was doing at Butler the other day. I mean, I would say that this is a formative process that they have been doing themselves since September. Continuously.
And in fairness to that, a 0.5% is less than, south of 1,600 books. So if there's a greater amount of books that have been looked at, I think that would serve to know as well, because what have we found? And how many books have been acted on that we didn't even know about? Have any? I think that's a question. That number is so large, I don't know if that is just books in print, duplicates, that's every library, does that include classroom libraries?
That's just our media center libraries, so our big libraries in the school.
Okay.
And doesn't include duplicates, correct? That 336?
I didn't get that number for you, so
Okay.
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
My guess is it probably does include duplicates because it's very hard to pull out. I mean, we would have to create a spreadsheet that has lots of formulas and stuff to figure out where titles overlap, because obviously titles appear, several times. Some schools have several copies of several titles, so.
Next question. I know we've all been here a long time. I have many questions, but I will provide them to you, Ms. Landish.
Sure.
So let me just hit the highlights. On the notification side to parents, my understanding is that if a book goes out, a parent gets a notification of the title only. It doesn't tell them anything else. And on one of the slides, it talked about parental involvement and how important that is. Everybody would agree with that. But even the most involved parent who sees a notification come up of just a title may not think twice if they just see the title. Is there any way to add something more to that notification, like graphic sexual content? Or
Yeah, as Melissa Yao mentioned through the parent feedback this evening, we'll look at that with, is it Destiny we'll look at that with Destiny. This was the first, probably, school district request, quite honestly, of even the notification process, which took some time and was complex. So not saying we will not investigate, because my team, we will do our due diligence with that. So certainly going to look into that in terms of giving more information than the title. So that's one of the things on our to-do list.
Good, thank you.
I can tell you that our library catalogs are open. You don't need a login to search for anything in the library catalog. So parents, if they have a concern, if they did want to check out, all they have to do is type in that title, and they will get a summary of that book that includes, just a brief summary of the story. It will include, usually it will include what's called an interest level. So who's going to want to read this book? And it will say something like K to 3, 3 to 6, 5 to 8, 9 to 12. So it will indicate that. It will also talk about a grade level. It will probably give you a grade level reading level. That's kind of at the bare minimum, what you will see in that record when you pull it up. You'll also see in library speak what we call subject headings, which are themes that are throughout that book. And newer books have more descriptive subject headings than some older ones. those are standard headings that come through Library of Congress and that, so, and a publication called Sears, so, we don't have that much control over how those are produced, but the records that we get for all the books that we have that information in it, so it's very easy for anyone. You don't even have to be a attendee of our district, you can just go right to our catalog and search.
I'm so
And
glad you're
Melena,
here. I just want to say I'm so glad you're here, and that was a great suggestion. Our website is really, too, very, very comprehensive. Library media specialists have done a tremendous job putting a plethora of resources on that site, so thank you for reminding us of that.
And I believe we did when we rolled out our parents' notification letter, that we did include videos of how parents could do exactly what Melena is talking about. So that might be something that we just need to reintroduce because that was provided. And part of the reason when we did talk about what we were going to provide to parents with that notification in terms of all I get was a title, we landed on what Melena is saying. And again, there was a link to a video of Melena doing a screencast of how to log in and where to see that. We landed on that because it's exactly what we see with the platform that we purchased from. What we didn't want to do was link to all of the possible ways that you can find reviews using Google, because quite honestly, lots of people have different opinions about books, and we didn't feel in our place to tell parents, you could go here, you could go here, you could go here. Like, that's up to you as a parent to decide what avenue you want to go to look up opinions on a book. I have friends who hate the genre that I read, and I have other friends who love the genre that I read. We're going to provide you with the information that we get when we purchase that book. And again, we can probably revisit sharing that out again so that parents know that they can very quickly see a lot more than just the title of the book.
So, some of the reviews, though, that you would see on an Amazon or Google are much more helpful.
And as a parent, you can most certainly log on to those.
Is there any way to link to that or cross-reference that? Is that even doable? Suggest it? And the reason I bring that up is I understand that we're relying on what sounds like professional reviews, but parents that have read these books make, very, very good assessments of what's in them. And in all of the things, I appreciate what you're saying. All of the reviews, if I'm reading books, reviews are reviews. But when it comes to your kids reading a book, it's much more helpful to have people in your boat telling you about the book.
So we can look into that. I think to Jody's point, right now our system is designed to talk to Destiny. So the way our notification system, if you remember, that was a custom-built notification system. Destiny didn't do it for us. It was a partnership that we did, and again, we are, to my knowledge, the only district that has built something like that. And so we can most certainly talk to our tech department and work with Destiny to see what the capability would be to do something like that.
Sure.
Yeah, and we've asked the company we've asked Follett to work with us in terms of changing how those might be delivered. It's not as efficient as we would have liked it to be because they get a daily notice and not just at the time of checkout, and it's just not available right now. The other thing I would say is just to say it is when I want to see what parents are thinking about a book, I go to a site called Common Sense Media. And I would say that that's a pretty fair assessment. My concern about Amazon and Google, if you read anything about reviews on Amazon, people can, I got hacked into my Amazon account. Someone hacked in there to make reviews of stuff that I hadn't bought, but it was going to be in my name. So I would be leery of those kind of sites because of that, but I do know Common Sense Media does a great job with all kinds of media, not just books, but with television shows and movies, and as a parent, I think that's probably one of the best sites out there. Can we attach the review, what it would take We would have to go into every single record and like list the website. It would be labor intensive. It'd just be easier to say, here's the link to Common Sense Media.
No, I appreciate that, obviously. And I didn't know about Common Sense Media, so thank you for that recommendation. What, maybe switching gears a little bit, there's the library media specialist, which I understand the 5 librarians make the decision. Now, in the presentation, it says that DPI is consulted and also recommends.
No. Right.
So a DPI licensed media specialist makes that decision, which are the 5 we have.
Oh, they choose the 5, or they license the 5? Is that, I'm reading wrong in your slide, I guess.
Our 5 are licensed.
Yes.
Yeah.
The same way that
And
the
that's what
teacher
that's
is
referring to?
licensed.
Yes.
Okay. So the recommendations then, you also had mentioned a professional review system. Is that separate from DPI? Is that part of the vendor?
That system.
Where are we purchasing that from?
That system refers to our selection process, which is outlined in the handbook, and nothing's different than what we've already been talking about with the selection process.
Okay.
We, as librarians, subscribe to professional journals, and reviews come from professional journals. Again, those are the ones I was referring to that we tend to focus on ones that are focused on school-age kids. We are one of the places, actually, some of the places that we purchase from will sometimes aggregate reviews, which is what you've seen when we provide the reviews for you on different things. We're using that we basically follow it where we buy stuff from, but they'll give us the reviews of as many different review sources as they have access to. But we subscribe to the actual journals ourselves.
One follow-up to that. The amount of books that the 5 of you have to review, or that new books that come in every year, roughly what is that workload? Because I think part of the concern that was raised initially was how, with this many books, not only what we have, but so many books coming in a year, how do 5 of you manage that? What is that workload like, and how many books are actually coming into each of you every year?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer because we don't buy, I think we gave you the number of something like, what was it? Did we figure out like 8,000?
I heard 8,000, but I don't know if that was correct.
But what you have to understand is what's happening is popular books are worn, so we're constantly replacing popular books. So I would, just off the top of my head, my guess would be that at least a quarter of what we're ordering is just replacing what's really popular and worn and falling apart and needs to be replaced.
Okay.
So we also talk to each other, we share lists. For instance, Mary Beth Haas over at South, it does a great job looking for books in Spanish. She's just got some really great resources to help us find that. She shares that list, and so that helps me. So I share lists with her as well. So it's it's not quite divide and conquer, but it's a sharing model. We all attend different, we can listen to book talks from other professionals, podcasts, different blogs that talk about books, where there's even more information than reviews. A lot of times it's, professionals talking about any concerns they might have of a book. So we're using all these different sources. It's a big work, I won't lie, it's a big workload though. And there's a lot of work to it. There really is.
I believe it.
But it's a labor of love. You gotta understand it's a labor of love.
So just to unpack that a little bit, roughly 8,000 titles, 25% are replacements. 5 of you are to look at roughly 1,200 new books. And then you do that not only collaboratively, but you have all these associations, other librarians. You know, someone read this book here, this, and so you start to pick that apart. How many books do the librarians read a year? And not for fun, that you...
I don't read
here at
anything
school.
for fun. Actually, I lied. I read a book for fun right after Christmas, but it was totally not related to school. But, yeah, most of what I read, and I not only read, I mean, not only do I have that stack of books on my nightstand, but I'm also listening as I go back and forth to work. I'm utilizing Sora and reading things that are coming in, or from the public library, I can borrow things. So I can't answer the question of how many books do I read. It's got to be at least 2 a month, and probably more. Sometimes I might read, a really good strategy that a lot of librarians use is to read a couple of chapters, just to get the feel for the book, and you can kind of tell where things are going, and so you can say, okay, there's not going to be a problem here. Like I said, sometimes I look at the book and I'm like, I'm really worried about this, and I'll read it, or concerned or curious about it, and I'll say, we're going to read this one cover to cover, just to make sure I'm comfortable with the content. So I'm sure that between all of us, I'm sure it's at least 2 to 3 books a month that we're either reading or listening to, or reading about.
And I guess the overall question is to the process. There's so many titles that, we're not going to know of everything that comes in that we may or may not need to review in the future. So it goes back to the process of how do we do this, and we're working on that. I'm just using your time to make the point, I guess. So I really do appreciate all the time that is put in, and, like you said, it's a labor of love, so we appreciate that.
She'd be happy to have you come over to her school and order a pizza and read some books with her.
Our aides
Do I get to write reviews?
Yeah, our aides read our books too. I just had an aide, aides will sometimes say, I think you ought to look at this one or whatever, because they're just as curious when, it's like Christmas when the new books come and everybody wants to open them up and see them. So our aides help in this process. Usually they don't help in the choosing, but they'll help us in reviewing what we have in front of us, so.
Okay. My last question, I think. So we use one vendor.
No, we don't.
Oh, it's not Follett Macklin, that's,
So the list.
those are 2 different ones.
Yeah, so the list of vendors, Follett School Solutions is probably our most used vendor.
Okay.
It's what we call a jobber, and they contract with all the different publishers. There is a Follett publisher, but that's a separate entity. So these guys are aggregating books from lots of different publishers as we request them.
Okay.
Mackin is used by one of the librarians just because she likes their software. And it's the same thing as Follett. It's the exact same idea that they're contracting with all these different publishers. At our high schools, we use a vendor called Salem, which is a reference book. But it's a physical book. Overdrive, which is the parent company of Sora, is our ebook, one of our ebook ones. We also use Gale, which is another. These are ebooks, but they're very, very strong reference books designed mostly for high school, upper high school, and college. And then we all do some purchasing at Barnes & Noble, because sometimes we just need something really fast. A teacher's requesting it or whatever, so we usually keep a gift card to Barnes & Noble and probably spend a couple $100 a year, each of us, at that. We have a very good relationship with Boswell Book Company in Milwaukee. They bring us authors for author visits for free. And so we try to order from them. And in fact, they gave us a great donation after the parade situation of books about tragedy, and their staff really helped us make some good choices around that. And then, of course, last resort, if we have to, if we can't find it anywhere else, something out of print that's somebody really wants, Amazon is another place, but it's not very much of our budget.
I lied, I have one more question. we got an email that said that we were having trouble getting books, so we were having trouble spending the money that we received in 2019, 2020, roughly, I think. If we have all these outlets, why haven't we spent that money? And I guess this would go to balance, and, you know, the point was made that we need more nonfiction titles. So, other than workload being what it is, why haven't we at least used the money in front of us to make more purchases?
The physical books themselves weren't available. Like I said, anyone who works in, you know, you hear the supply chain, wasn't there a huge paper shortage in the fall? A lot of printing is done in China, so that caused some issues as well. It's not that Follett and Mackin can't get us these books. I saw lots of books that would say, okay, this book is coming out in September or October, and then it would change and say postponed indefinitely. Just because from the publisher end of printing the item or getting the item from wherever it was being printed that's the problem we're having. It's the same supply chain issue that anybody who deals with procurement is dealing with right now.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Ms. Reddy?
Thank you. Excuse me. I usually try not to repeat what others have already said because we've all heard it and we're tired. However, it needs to be said prior to the final thought that I have. I agree with much of what Dr. Piastek had shared. We're not trying to remove books. We just need to make sure that they're appropriate levels and that our parents are aware of them and they know how to find the reviews and stuff. So one of my thoughts, which was already shared, is to somehow link a review tag to those parental emails, which I did not opt out of because they actually helped me with my kids remember that their library books are due. That's one thing that I found with my kids. But the message that I've been thinking about, I agree. There's a lot of uncomfortable topics and content, and even just these small amount of books. But in my attempt to look outside of my world and as we ask the question, do these belong in our learning environments? In multiple, in multiple presentations tonight, we talked about getting to know our students and knowing their backgrounds. And as uncomfortable as these topics make me with my own children in our home, I'm going to try not to get emotional about this because it's real, but the fact of the matter is that we have students in our district that these subject matters are their life. And if we want to connect with them, sometimes these books are the source. Now, I pray that that's a small percentage, but, and I'm not saying that I'm for or against, I'm just saying that the reality is that some of these books are reality, and these contents are reality for some of our students. So as long as we continue to work on the process, as we've been talking about, making sure that parents and caretakers know where these books are at the appropriate levels, it may become a tool that we can use to help our students that are in some of those uncomfortable topic life situations.
Thank you.
That's all.
Can I speak to that? I first of all want to say thank you. I can't tell you that I have had meetings with parents and students who've been in that position, and I would say that not every single one of our books in our libraries is for every single one of our students. And in fact, whenever I have a student in front of me, I'll say, my question isn't, well, can I help you find a book? And then I start the interview process. Well, what do you want to read about? Or what was the last good book that you read? And then I'll start making suggestions based on what they tell me, not based on what I want to sell them. Because I'm not a salesperson. I'm trying to help that kid find the book that matches where they are. And like you say, I appreciate that you recognize that. And that's why we have books with difficult topics in them, and that's what concerns me about just flat out not having them.
I know this has been extremely difficult for all of you involved with this. I want to thank people in our community that did bring forth some, suggestions for you to review. I think you did take it very seriously. I think we agree that there were certain titles that needed to be either removed or moved up. But I don't think I could have picked a better group to really tackle this situation. I can tell you guys, as a group, way above and beyond. And that's not minimizing anything. It's not minimizing that it was 10 books or 5 books. The books that were brought to my attention needed to be either removed or they needed to be bumped up. And you took that on, and you took a list of other books on, and there wasn't a thing that was asked of you or directed to you that you did not respond to in a very timely fashion. And if that wasn't the case, we would have heard about it. Believe me. So I'm extremely proud of all of you. I know most of you personally. And you've done an incredible job. But you yourself say that the job is not over. And you're continuing to listen to feedback and input and better ways of doing things. My only hope is that you all don't get on a bus and start touring the state or the country and taking your show on the road, because you would be extremely valued and wanted in a lot of districts. And I'm extremely proud that you're here in Waukesha. So thank you very much for your presentation tonight, your answering your questions, and to reassure us as a board and the community that your work is still not done, and that you are open to other questions, other suggestions. We can bring it back to another meeting, and we can continue to make this a better process.
Did Mr. Baumgart have a comment? No.
I'm waiting.
Dr. Piazza.
I did, I apologize. I know you were making some concluding comments, but I would like to, I know it's late, bear with me. This will be quick because we can table these maybe for future discussion, but let me be clear, I'm talking about X-rated material here. I am not talking about things that make us uncomfortable that I'm concerned about. I think the most important thing is that parents have the opportunity to know what their children are reading and to engage in that experience. It should not ever be about kids picking up something in isolation when their parents could be part of that, especially minors. And I do understand that sometimes they find those things on their own and they need to find those things on their own. But I'm talking about X-rated material. We have a lot in our media services handbook that talks about rated R videos and parent permission and all of that, but we don't talk at all about, again, the content of violent rape in some of these books. So I am not opposed to having books in our libraries that have topics that represent different positions. I think it's very important, and I think we do need to represent all of our students. There are a couple other items, and I just would like to maybe hold these or have follow-up discussion. One is kind of getting back to this, the classroom libraries, because once those inventories are done, I think the follow-up question then is, how are those choice books informed also to parents, and how are students guided in selecting choice books that are appropriate for them? I appreciate, because we've worked with librarians to find appropriate books for higher level readers, which isn't always an easy thing to do. So how can teachers and parents work together to make sure that those choice books that aren't going to show up in an email somewhere are selected appropriately? The other thing that I just, this may be a longer conversation, but in reading through the handbook, I think I have a question about the discretion on removal of books, because we've talked a lot about who's making decisions about what books are coming in. It sounds like I don't know if we actually keep track of books that are getting removed, but is keeping books from ending up in a dumpster if somebody decides they don't want them in the library anymore? Are we having conversations about what's appropriate to also remove? Because, right, we're talking, and let me clarify, what we're talking about are books that we are actively considering the appropriateness of. But what I read in the handbook is procedures for disposing of discarded library materials based on what library media specialists determine should remain or should be removed from the collections.
We have a process, we call it our weeding process, and we can provide you with some information on what that process is and how the librarians conduct that. It's an ongoing process throughout the year that they utilize, and so we can most certainly present that information, because that's what you're referring to there.
Yeah, and I mean, I can't say I have any firsthand knowledge of this, but I understood there were potentially some books by a controversial children's author that landed in the garbage can at a few of our elementary schools. So I'd like to understand how that happens.
Anything else? Okay. With that, thank you very much for being here tonight. We appreciate your time and all your extra efforts behind the scenes. With that, we move on to other business. Any recommendation from committee members for future meetings?
Here.
Mr. Baumgart.
Yes, I have a recommendation for a future meeting. Recently, we've been getting some comments to us about our reading and the fact that we're at a low proficiency level. And by the way, next time you're near your Merriam-Webster, look up the word proficient. You're going to be a little bit surprised. But the concern I have is, how are we really evaluating what this proficiency is and so on? And I spent some time with Amy Reibel this morning and really got a little bit of an idea of what's going on here. It's very complicated. It's no longer a see Jane run type of a thing when we're talking about reading. Some strange things go on, such as if a child comes to us from another country, he or she has 1 year before they're going to be tested. And some of these people in 1 year will not be ready to be tested on the program. So what I would like to recommend is that we have some attention at one of our upcoming meetings about what is going on with the reading, how does it work, how is it evaluated, things like that. We might even get to the point where we would be able to do some reading, testing. Maybe whether it's board members or whether it's some parents that are irritated with the way we're doing our job. I think we have to look into this and find out what's really going on. And how bad are we doing or how bad are we not doing? So, and by the way, Amy knows I'm asking this question, so she's probably hiding back there.
She has her thumb up. She knows.
All right, thank you, that's mine.
Okay, and then we can talk about that, Jody and Amy, and go from there. Anything else? With that, our meeting is adjourned. I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. Your involvement and participation means a lot to me and the other committee members. The next meeting for teaching and learning will be held on Tuesday, March 1st at 6 p.m. here in the boardroom. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a good evening.